Good afternoon and welcome back. We are in the hearing on docket number 2024-203-E. It's the application of Kingstree East 230 LLC for a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for construction and operation of a 249 megawatt solar facility in Williamsburg County. We're in the testimony part from the company. And Mr. Torini, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
We have a live witness.
How about that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you like to swear the witness? We call Matthew Mears.
If you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Mears, could you please state your name, occupation, and business address?
Yes, my name is Matthew Mears. I'm the managing director of Sunworks North NC LLC, located at 106 Woodhall Drive, Henrico, Virginia 23229.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 13 pages of direct testimony pre-filed in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any additions or corrections you wish to make to your testimony?
Yes, we need to make some updates. On page 4, line 1, the first
Mr.
sentence.
Mears, I hate to interrupt. Could you pull your microphone closer?
Wow. Okay.
Thank
That good? Oh, so yes, we need to make some updates. On page 4, line 1, the first sentence should read, "The inundation study, also called hydrology study, is now complete." On page 4, the sentence beginning on line 15 should read, "The title report for the site done in 2019 when the affiliate of Kingstree East 230 acquired the land has been updated by the same attorney who did the previous title search." The second sentence on line 16 should be deleted. On page 4, line 20, after the sentencing ending in survey, a new sentence should be added, "Both surveys have been commissioned."
And are those changes reflected on the revised page 4 we pre-filed in this docket, Mr. Mears?
Yes, those were filed yesterday.
Thank you. If I were to ask you to... Are we good? If I were to ask you the questions in your direct testimonies today, Mr. Mears, would your answers be the same?
Yes, with those updates we've just noted.
Mr. Chairman, I move to admit the direct testimony of Matthew Mears into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Mears will be entered in the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Mears, did your testimony have any exhibits?
Yes, my resume is attached as Exhibit MM-1. A photograph of a NEX tracker, single-axis tracker, is included as Exhibit MM-2. A diagram of Santee Cooper's 230 switching station is Exhibit MM-3, and a single-line diagram of the project substation is Exhibit MM-4.
Do you wish to make any changes to these exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, I move to admit exhibits MM1 through MM4 to the direct testimony of Matthew Mears into evidence as a composite exhibit.
The pre-filed exhibits of witness Mears identified as MM1 through 4 are marked for identification and will be placed in the record as exhibit number 5.
Mr. Mears, please tell the commission about your educational background.
I attended North Carolina State University, graduated in 2000. I received a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a Bachelor's of the Arts in French Language and Literature. I also attended Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. I graduated in 2006 with my MBA.
How long have you worked in the renewable energy sector?
My entire career, including prior to graduating college, which is 26 years.
And is your employment history recapped in Exhibit MM1, your resume?
Yes, it is.
You were in renewable energy since before graduation. How about in the solar sector? When did you begin that?
Presuming we do not count the solar thermal water heater I built in 4th grade, my
Why not?
Well, I did take coursework in solar PV design at NC State University, though my first professional work was in 2006. I was a banker at a bank called HSH Nordbank, and I started financing solar projects. Between those periods, I had worked in the wind industry.
How many projects have you developed, solar projects?
In solar, I have done, well, solar projects, I've done 10 projects that are currently in operation, 3 that are under construction, that represents 138 megawatts. The 10 projects that are in operation are 270 megawatts. As with any developer, I have developed many projects which have failed, and these are just projects that I did in Virginia. I also have projects that are under development currently, obviously here in South Carolina and also in Alabama.
Have you ever appeared before public bodies and given testimony related to solar projects?
I have received, I've advocated for conditional use permits, which are required in every single county in Virginia by statute. That required, so 17 times I've appeared for a conditional use permit, 16 of which were approved, 13 of which were built or under construction. I actually also did 2 zoning ordinances in counties in Virginia.
And as a solar manager, what are your responsibilities as a project manager?
Generally speaking, I handle everything day to day, all the day-to-day operations. I basically handle all discretionary permitting, all aspects of the project development, including engineering studies, wetland studies, solar resource estimates, financial modeling, tax structuring, and the interconnection. Basically everything for this project is basically everything other than the land acquisition, which the client already possessed.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to qualify Mr. Mears as an expert witness in the field of solar project development.
Any objections? Hearing none, he's so qualified.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good, we got you the good mic now. I'd like to talk a little bit about our project today as we recap your testimony. What is the status of Kingstree's project development? Where are you in the project development timeline?
In the overall timeline, we're probably about halfway through. We have site control, as Ms. Rizar testified. That comes through an affiliate of the project company. We have submitted the wetlands studies to the Army Corps of Engineers. We are waiting for delineation concurrence from them. We have done what I call all the desktop environmental studies and the species, on-site species studies, as Mr. Thomas testified, but as he also testified, you're never done dealing with environmental agencies. You're always working with them to make sure everything stays kosher through the entire life of the project. The historical and cultural studies have been concluded. As I just mentioned in my update, we have completed the hydrology study, which is basically how deep does the water get when it rains, the 100-year floodplain, and the title report, making sure we understand what property and what rights we have on that parcel. Remaining to be done are survey, geotechnical tests, and fiber optic availability. And purely from a commercial sense, we obviously need offtake.
And
power purchase agreement. We need someone to buy the power.
Okay. Excuse me. There was some reference to a map earlier today that was made by our intervener, Dr. Lane, and I just you've been to this project site, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I have a map on the Elmo, if somebody can help me, tell me how to turn it on. Oh, there we go. Is this, can you identify this map?
Oh, yes, this is the project study limits for the project. It basically shows the entire 4,700 acres that we are asking for permission to use for solar. As we've mentioned several times, we are not going to use the entire site, as 1,000 acres are currently identified as wetlands, plus we have other offsets that we are required by the county ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Mears. And what are the basic components of the project that you intend to build?
The very basic components starts with the solar panel. The solar panel is basically a conductive material that changes the photons of light from photons of light to electricity. That electricity will then flow to the inverters. The inverters will then transform or invert that power from DC to AC. It will then go to a pad-mounted transformer, which will take it from basically the output of the inverter to 34.5 kV, which is the medium voltage that we're using for this project, and most projects do. And then it will go to a project substation where it will be transformed from 34.5 kV to 230 kV, and it will then flow at that point to the Santee Cooper substation, which is being built for this project, which is being paid for by us, by the project. To be very clear, everything's being paid for by the project. Oh, and I forgot to mention the trackers. We are using single-axis horizontal trackers as our preliminary design. Those trackers allow us to follow the sun in one dimension, which greatly increases the output.
Well, those trackers, was a representation of a single-axis tracker included in your testimony as Exhibit MM2?
Yes, that is a picture of an X-Tracker tracker from one of my sites in Virginia. A little bit older version of it, but yes, that is the basic design.
What does a single-axis tracker do?
Basically, it follows the sun. A fixed tilt can't move, pretty self-explanatory. The single-axis tracker will move in one axis like this. Dual-axis trackers would basically follow the sun and point directly at the sun, and I can tell you from my business experience, you don't want to do it because it's way too expensive.
Okay. You were mentioning connecting to the Santee Cooper 230 kV line a minute ago, and I'd like to ask you a little bit more about that. How is that connection made? What's required for it?
So, Santee Cooper is requiring us not requiring us to build. They were requiring us to pay for Santee Cooper to build a 5-breaker ring bus. Basically, the existing line, which I can't remember the name of right at the time. Oh, there it is. The Santee Cooper Winya Hemingway 230 kV line. They're going to break that in half. They're going to bring it into the substation, and then we are going into the substation on one of the additional breakers. This is the most reliable interconnection which is possible that Santee Cooper designs. So maximize reliability, and that's basically what they require. They're going to require us to pay for.
And is it Ms. Rezar mentioned earlier that the project's intent is to bid into, or actually the project has bid into the Santee Cooper IRP, is that right?
Or the RFP, yes.
RFP, Request for Proposals.
Yes, that bid was due, I believe, August 5th, if memory serves.
And did the RFP of Santee Cooper call for any other generation resources than solar?
No, it only asked for solar resources, and did not ask for batteries also.
Okay. So, let me ask you a different question. This was covered before, but I want to make sure it's understood. What is a QF?
Oh, a QF is a qualified facility which meets the requirements of PURPA. PURPA has been changed many times over the years. The basic interpretation for how it works in South Carolina, well, if at the federal level it's any project less than 80 megawatts, is what it applies to, given the requirements in this state of you have to visit this commission if it's above 75 megawatts or above. Everyone decided to do their projects at 74.9 megawatts.
And does a utility have an obligation to purchase power from a QF?
Yes, they have the obligation to purchase, but not what rate the QF gets paid is up to the jurisdiction of the commission of that relevant state.
And is this project, Kingstree East 230, a QF?
No, we are 249 megawatts, which is well in excess of the 80 megawatts that would allow us to be a QF.
Will anyone have an obligation to purchase power from this utility?
Nobody
I mean,
is,
from this project?
nobody is required to buy our power.
How, excuse me? I'm sorry, I thought somebody. There was some talk about wetlands on the site. How is the project going to handle wetlands and wetland permitting? What's the status of that?
Well, as I mentioned, we're awaiting our concurrence letter from the Army Corps of Engineers. That will say, basically, then that's the basic thing we're still waiting on. Once we get that, we are going to basically avoid all jurisdictional wetlands because avoidance is the best mitigation.
And when you updated your testimony, you mentioned something called LIDAR. What is LIDAR?
LIDAR, it actually is an abbreviation, don't ask me for what, but it's something like light emitting something or other. But basically, we shine lasers on the ground, which bounce back up, which gives us the topographical terrain. And that way, it basically is just a faster way of surveying topography.
And you mentioned ALTA.
Mm-hmm.
What, are you familiar with ALTA? Can you explain that?
Yes, the ALTA survey is a detailed land survey that satisfies the minimum requirements of the American Land Title Association and the National Professional Surveyors. Its purpose is really to make sure we don't build across an easement that we aren't supposed to build on, is how I use it.
In your testimony, you referred to geotechnical work that needs to be done. Can you tell the commission about that?
Yes, there's three things we need to do for geotechnical. We typically will do soil borings, typically to about 25 feet in the areas where we believe there's going to be a solar array, and then down to 50 feet where the substation or switching station are going to be. Then we come back in the areas where we believe that we're going to put the solar panels. We basically drive I-beams into the ground, and we do the very sophisticated we try to pull them up, and we see how much force it takes to pull them up. We will also do electrical resistivity testing, which basically is how well does the ground conduct current. And there's always some soil studies, because we have to know how corrosive the soil is so that we know that we can design the I-beams to last the requisite 35-year useful life of the project.
Does this project need telecommunications service?
Yes, Farmers Telephone Cooperative is the provider of fiber optic service in the area, and based on its website, we believe that fiber is currently available to the site.
Has Kingstree East 230 submitted interconnection requests to Santee Cooper?
Yes, we have submitted 2 interconnection requests to Santee Cooper. The only purpose of the second interconnection request was to change our designation from Energy Resource Interconnection Service to Network Resource Interconnection Service, frankly because the RFP required that we be NRIS, and we could not do it under the existing interconnection agreement because it would be considered a material modification. Therefore, we had to be restudied. The original interconnection request was filed in May of 2021, and we've received 2 cluster studies, a facility study, and we've signed the large generator interconnection agreement, and we are trying to work with Santee Cooper on getting what's called the CAIAC, the Commitment in Aid of Construction Agreement, signed, but there have been some issues on the Santee Cooper side getting that signed.
These studies, who pays for them?
Oh, we pay for all of them. And they're as this commission, I think, approved, there are withdrawal penalties if we back out during various points in the process. At varying points, we've had liabilities. Our withdrawal penalty has been, well, we estimated several $1 million.
Does, Ms. Rezard mentioned the Williamsburg County ordinance. Do you agree with her that this project's subject to the Williamsburg County ordinance?
Oh, yes. We intend to follow all the conditions of the Williamsburg County ordinance that was enacted, I believe it was May it passed of this year. And it requires, 100-foot setbacks from the property line to basically from the project fence. It requires us to be 300 feet from the nearest residence or church. It requires that there be a 50-foot vegetative buffer between the property line and the fence, and between any roads, right-of-ways, and residences or churches that are within 500 feet of the facility. It requires us to have anti-reflective coating on the panels to minimize glare. It requires that we cannot have a noise exceeding 65 decibels as measured at the adjacent property line once the facility is up and operational. And just for reference, 65 dB is equivalent to what you hear when a car goes by at 60 miles per hour, which is, we have a state road right adjacent to our site, so that seems very logical to us. Now, the sources of noise are the inverters when they're on, which they're only on during the day. They have fans because they need cooling, as most electronic devices do, but these are located in the center of the project. The trackers do make noise, but it's minimal because it's not like we're moving constantly. They actually move like every 15 minutes. They'll just move just a little bit, and there's a little bit of noise, but you generally don't hear it. And then we have a decommissioning performance guarantee that we have to post up front, and that goes along with a decommissioning plan that we also have to provide the county, and the county has to approve all these things.
Does the decommissioning performance guarantee involve some financial obligations on the part of the project?
Oh yes, we have to post surety that is, well, I think the actual language is something like approved by, I believe, the county attorney, but it says specifically we can post cash, letter of credit, or a surety bond, I believe. I know letter of credit.
Does it have to be updated periodically?
Yes, we have to update that on 5 years from the date of submission, which is not 5 years from the date we go online.
And there was some discussion earlier, I believe it was a commissioner's question, about how much this project will pay in taxes. Is that something you know?
Yes, the project will pay more than $800,000 a year in taxes. To put that in perspective, according to the Williamsburg County budget, which was recently approved on June 24th of this year, they estimated that a 1 mil increase in taxes $4 mil increase in taxes would raise their $400,000. So it made it very easy that 1 mil was roughly equal to $100,000. So we would raise, it'd be the equivalent of their property taxes for the entire county going up 8 mils, or since the entire county, the current mill rate is 200 mils based on their budget, we're paying equivalent to 4% of the entire property tax collected in the county if this project goes forward as planned.
Do you know anything about a comparison of the amount of CO2 that will be offset by this project compared to the amount of CO2 that's offset by the current timber harvesting process on the land?
So yes, the question is, how do we compare the benefits of the CO2 offset versus the sequestration potential of the timberland, which is the current use of the land? Based on internal studies, we estimated to be somewhere around 10,000 tons of carbon is what a forest would sequester in a given year, based on the what's it called, AVERT. Sorry, let me turn my pages here. Based on the I can't remember the name of that. It's
AVERT.
Yes, AVERT. From the EPA. We ran that using the actual power production estimated for this project, and our estimate is it would offset 410,000 tons per year. This represents about a 41 times more than what the timber would have absorbed. Those were our estimates, but this is in line with several different NREL reports. It is in line with some studies done in the Northeast, which basically came to the conclusion that in that case, it was 31 tons of carbon were offset per acre, and the solar farm in that case, and this was in Vermont, was going to offset, I'd have to look up the right number, but it basically was 30 times that. It was 349, sorry, I can't find the number, but it was roughly 30 times that. So we feel very confident in our estimates that we're going to offset at least, the generation will offset at least 30 times what we expect the to be sequestered, that would have been sequestered by the timberland.
What is Avert? Can you,
You would ask me that.
is it an online tool?
Yes, it is an online. It's a web tool, though it's available on the EPA's website. Though what we did is there's also a version that allows you to download it into Excel, which is far more useful, as it allows you to adjust certain characteristics of the project and customize it specifically. Notably, we had to adjust the capacity factor of the project from the default solar setting.
Could you tell the commission what the project's AC capacity is and DC capacity is?
All right, our AC capacity is 249 megawatts, and before anyone asks me why did we come up with such a screwy number, if you read the interconnection manual of Santee Cooper, if you go to 250 megawatts, they require you to have 3 basically lines coming out of your substation for redundancy. Since we only once we broke the line in half, we would only have 2. That would have required us to build a new 230 kV line, and that was going to probably be, it was unclear which substation it would have to go to, but the closest one was 21 miles, and we did not want to spend, we assumed $1 million a mile, which is probably low at this point, but we did not want to spend the money or the time to develop this transmission line. Therefore, we chose the project to be at 249 megawatts. As to the second part of your question, what is the DC capacity? That has not been decided exactly yet. Typically for a utility scale solar project, it varies somewhere. For every megawatt AC, you have somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 megawatts DC.
And the AC capacity is to measure what feeds the grid. Right?
Yes, that is what hits the grid. We are limited by our interconnection agreement very explicitly that we cannot deliver at any point in time more than 249 megawatts AC. So they may require us to also deliver reactive power as well.
Are you aware of other projects in the U.S. that are comparable in size to this project?
Oh yes, there are many. I'm from Virginia, as you may have noticed. There's a 500 megawatt project in Spotsylvania, Virginia. There's 150 and a 94 megawatt project, which are adjacent to each other in Surrey County, Virginia. There's 2 100 megawatt projects in this state that this commission has priorly approved that are adjacent to each other. So they're effectively a 200 megawatt project that are adjacent. Of other operating projects in the United States as of the end of last month, there would be 93 projects that are greater than 249 megawatts AC currently operating in the U.S. And as for future projects, there is actually, while it has not reached this commission, there's a 249.9 megawatt project in Marion County, South Carolina that's currently been proposed if you look at the interconnection queue. And then there's a number of 200 megawatt projects also that have been proposed in South Carolina. And there's 800 megawatt project proposed in Virginia in Charles County, City County, which is under development by Virginia Electric Power Company, which is the regulated state regulated entity of Dominion Energy, to name a few.
Are you familiar with the Inca projects that Ms. Resar was discussing with the commission of similar size?
Yes, I have been involved with all solar projects that Inca has done in the United States or is doing or under development, as that is what they hire me for. The larger project she was referencing was a 240 megawatt project called Mise, located in Texas, to which Inca is a minority owner of. And there's another smaller project that is minority owner of in Utah.
Mr. Mears, thank you. Please answer any questions our interveners may have or the commissioners may have for you.
Mr. Torini,
Yes, sir.
I need to make a correction for the record. The pre-filed exhibits the only pre-filed exhibit that was separate was MM1, MM2, MM3, and MM4 were not pre-filed, but they were placed with photos and diagrams in the witness's pre-filed direct testimony at pages 8, 9, and 10. So they're in the record. I just wanted to make that clear
I understand.
for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We will now move to any cross-examination. I'm going to go through the names, and if they're not here, I don't know that I'll have to do it again, but South Carolina Department of Environmental Services, South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, South Carolina Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, Mr. Kelvin Washington, Williamsburg County.
Yes, sir, I'm here, Your Honor, and I don't have any questions.
Well, thank you for sticking with us. Ms. Lane, any questions?
I think I have addressed this before, but I want to, is it on? Mr. Mears, page 1, line 8.
Ms. Lane,
Sir?
you're behind the computer and the court reporter cannot see you. And if you could slide over, there you go.
That better?
Much better. Thank you very much.
Okay. Did I mess it up? Yeah. Okay, page 1, line 8. Mr. Mears states that he has developed 270 megawatts. Mr. Mears, at 249, will this be your single largest project?
Not that I have worked on. These are, as I said, these are only the projects that are currently operational. These will not be the largest project I have ever worked on. I have worked on, well, I obviously worked on the 240 megawatt project that was Inca acquired. I have worked on others projects of similar size that unfortunately did not advance. They were in that category of failed projects.
So this is the largest one you've actually been the lead on?
No, I was on the lead on those, that they just didn't advance. They failed. The interconnection costs were too high.
Gotcha. I don't know how to say this, but commissioners, I'm going to work off of this rather than what he testified, because I wouldn't have any way to adequately respond, because the oral testimony I didn't have a chance to write down or look at. All right. I see an error in, tell me, Ms. Rainey, which document is this? It was presented in the document, in the docket. It's presented in the docket 2024-203-E, and it is presented by the Timmons Group, and it does not say Kingstree East as the title.
Is that a question?
I guess the question is, why does it say Kingstree West rather than Kingstree East?
You'll have to address the witness.
Mr. Mears, why did your Timmons Group engineering people title this one Kingstree West 115 Solar?
Could you say what this one is, so I know what you're referring to?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps you could show him the exhibit.
2024-203E, but the engineer submitted this as,
You gotta stay with the microphone.
I said, the Timmons Group submitted that as a true document as testimony, and the title of that exhibit is Kingstree West 115, not Kingstree East 230.
Oh, your observation is correct. That's why it says it's a preliminary drawing, not for construction. But it is a map showing Kingstree East. It is showing the preliminary layout for Kingstree East. It is just nothing more than the title was not caught and corrected. Oops, sorry about that.
Is Mr. Dan Jameson the head of the Timmons Group?
No, he is an engineer of stormwater, mainly, his principal work is stormwater design and in other engineering design. He has designed, for my projects in Virginia, he's done road design for me, and he's done other, like permitting aspects. He's submitted stuff for me before.
Okay.
But he's not the head, no, he is not the head of Timmons.
I didn't mean he's the head of Timmons. I mean, is he your number one engineer?
No, Rick Thomas is my standard, who was on the, presented earlier today, is my primary contact at Timmons.
So Mr. Jameson did not draw these?
I cannot read the name of who, well, it says drawn by, but forgive me for saying I cannot read that. Yeah, I just can't read it, sorry.
That's critical.
Okay.
That's critical that we be able to.
That's not a question, ma'am. Please address the witness and not the commission.
Mr. Mears, is there any way that you can get the name of the person who drew these preliminary drawings?
Can you tell me what exhibit this came out of? And I should be able to read the version I have.
Mr. Torini has it.
Ma'am, is this what you're showing? Is that what you're referring to?
Yep.
Oh, there we go. It says it's drawn, oh, sorry. It says drawn by Timmons Group. It does not give me a name on here. But Timmons has done many preliminary designs for me. Every single project I developed in Virginia, they did all preliminary and conceptual site plans for me that were approved by numerous county agencies. And they've drawn preliminary designs. Our state permitting process is very different from how it is here in South Carolina. It is more of there's no testimony process. We basically have to meet certain requirements, and that is submitted to the state, and then we get a written approval back. It's called a permit by rule, and they have submitted many preliminary drawings for that state permit by rule process. So.
Well, Mr. Mears, I'm a little confused as how to proceed. Because since it says Kingstree West, I'd like to ask some questions about Kingstree West, even though it's Kingstree East. Are all of your engineers that you deal with ABET certified?
Can you explain what ABET is?
The Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology.
I have no idea. We use professional engineers licensed in the state in which they are doing the drawings. That is, and which is what is required by all state, well, I don't know what state agencies, but I know it's what is required by the Williamsburg County, that all drawings have to be stamped by a engineer licensed to do business in the state of South Carolina. So that I can tell you. But this is, as you can see, is not a stamped drawing because it is preliminary and not for construction. We will get to construction drawings, which will be stamped.
Okay. I'd like to address with you, Mr. Mayor, a question about the type of soil that is important for solar. Are you familiar with the USDA analysis of site-specific reports that are available to solar development entities that will actually tell you if the project is minimally acceptable, not acceptable, minimally acceptable, acceptable, and very acceptable? Are you familiar with that process?
I am not familiar with what you're referencing because the USDA, well, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRC, gives us the types of soil, and that information was provided in the application. So but I am not familiar with whatever you're referring to, acceptable or not acceptable for what, honestly.
For solar?
I have never seen that, ma'am.
It's there. It's there. I am on page, well, it doesn't matter. Kingstree East, 230. How long has your business been in existence?
Kingstree East or my own company?
Kingstree East.
Ooh, good question. I do not know. I would have to look it up when the LLC was formed and registered to do business in South Carolina. I can tell you we're registered in Delaware, but we are what's called a foreign entity in the state of South Carolina.
So Kingstree West does Kingstree West belong to IKEA?
Ms. Reiser answered that earlier today. It's owned by Inca and, yeah, Ms. Reiser answered that earlier today. I don't know their org chart by heart. And and just to be clear, IKEA and Inca Investments are not, IKEA Retail is a separate entity from Inca Investments, to be really clear.
Right. How many different levels does Inca Investments have?
Define levels of what?
Like subsidiaries and LLCs and levels of corporate entities? One, two,
as I said,
three?
I do not know their org chart.
Is the parent company considered a 501c3?
They're not incorporated in the United States, so U.S. tax law would not apply. So I cannot answer that question, and it's not unanswerable.
Are you aware that well, let me ask you, does Kingstree West 230 have a Dun & Bradstreet rating or a Better Business Bureau rating?
I think you meant Kingstree East 230, but no, because we have no business operations to date. It is a company established purely for the purpose of developing the solar project, which is standard operating procedure in any type of development, not just solar.
Did you know that other states that have had solar for longer than South Carolina actually request solar developers and companies provide business backgrounds?
Yeah, I've provided them before, but it usually doesn't tell you much more than what we've already presented here today. That we're owned by a large corporation that can meet the obligations of the LLC.
Page 4 of 13. The testimony reads, the inundation study is also called the hydrologic study, is currently in process. Do you know how this hydrologic study meets, exceeds, matches the South Carolina Flood Mitigation Hazard Plan?
Let's first say, as I updated it previously in my testimony, that study is now complete. I am unfamiliar with the flood plan, but what the study does is it takes the 100-year rainfall event and it estimates what the water, how deep the water would get and how fast the water would be moving across our site. And that is what the purpose of this study is. I cannot comment on its relationship to the whatever you referenced.
Right. I can explain why I asked the question if y'all want to know. But at any rate, are you familiar with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association's recent, like as of this week? I was very shocked to learn, so I'm asking you if you knew about the use of decades-old rainfall data that in essence became a part of flood and hydrologic studies, and how weather people and the general public are now concerned that old data has been used.
Actually, yes, ma'am, I am. You're correct. The data that is used to calculate the 100-year flood only goes, that period ends in the year 2000. And it is a flaw. However, I am not the one here to make the regulations. I am here to follow said regulations. And I am following said regulations as required. Actually, it would be by Williamsburg County and the SC DN. So I followed their guidance, and I am. But I agree with you. They are out of date and should be updated.
Right. But could you also see how a resident living very close to said solar project would be concerned?
No, ma'am, I cannot, because whether the rain falls on solar panels or it rain falls on the ground, it's still going to flow the exact same way. So,
Well, now that you mentioned that, when solar panels track, they wake up when the sun comes up, and they track the sun across the sky, and they go flat at night, correct?
not always, but sometimes they go flat at night. It depends on a variety of factors.
Usually do they go flat?
Actually, no. Most times you leave them at maximum tilt because you want to limit the amount of dust that accumulates on them, and they're more likely to, if at this angle, well, the dust is less likely to settle on it. So therefore, they're usually at a very steep angle. That is also the position that they are in if you have a wind stow event, i.e. winds greater than what they're, you want them to experience. So as a safety measure, they are generally stowed at a sharp angle, because if the wind, even though you would think this is the bad position for a wind, because it's going to put the maximum force, I'm going to go like this, the maximum force as the wind hits it would create the maximum force. That is true. However, if you put them horizontal, as you were suggesting, the wind doesn't blow the same over a distance, and you start having the trackers do this kind of motion as a wave motion, which will destroy the tracker. So generally speaking, they're actually at a sharp angle, both to mitigate wind risk, storm coming up. It's also, that is the ideal position for a hailstorm. If it's at this sharp angle, the hail's more likely to glance off without doing any damage.
So I guess that works if your hail comes at night. Okay, on page 4 of 13, is 18 inches described as a navigable water source?
I have no earthly idea. If it's during a flood event, I doubt you want to be in 18 inches of water, as you're liable to get washed away. So I wouldn't want to try it. Was it navigable? I do not know.
Okay, line 10 says that the project is consulting with South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. So Do you have any idea when that will be available?
As I mentioned in my testimony earlier, that is a ongoing process. You are constantly talking with them about the studies, the mitigations. There are large quantities, or not large quantities, there, as was mentioned earlier, there are periods during the year when we are not going to be allowed to build the project. And it varies by species. Specifically, the kite swallow was mentioned earlier today, and there are required setbacks. So there is continuous dialogue. Once
Okay.
we're placed in operation, we still have to continue to talk with SC Department of Natural Resources in case something comes onto the land after the fact. So just because we're done building it doesn't mean we're done dealing with them.
All right. Okay, line 15, by title report, do you mean title search? Is that what you mean?
Yes, it's the title report that says you own the land, and then you buy title insurance on that for the value of the solar farm, so that if anyone ever comes back and says, hey, we think we own this piece of land, that risk is covered.
So I'll ask you the same question I asked Ms. Resar. Do you know if a Inca affiliate owned this property before 2019?
No, I'm not aware. According to the Williamsburg County tax records, it was acquired by its current owner in 2019. According to the press releases I have seen, I believe it was Weyerhaeuser they bought the land from, who at some point bought it from Midwest Vaco. But I do not know every entity that's owned it in its entire history. I would have to look at the title report, as you mentioned.
Is that title report available to the public?
I don't believe so.
Could it be?
Let me defer on that one. I'm not exactly sure the relevance of what the title report would show relative to the risks that this project would present to the public.
I'm on page 5. Who do you plan to conduct the seismic study? Line 12.
Don't know. Probably Terracon is a good they're a well-respected engineering firm in this state that has done soil borings and seismic studies for projects in South Carolina that I'm aware of. So Terracon, which is the first name that pops to mind. I can't promise you that's who it's going to be, but that's who I would think. That's my first thought.
At what point will those reports be available?
Those reports will never be made available publicly, but they will be used as the basis of the calculations that will be submitted to the building department of Williamsburg County to demonstrate that the project meets the structural and physical requirements that the county has for this project.
Mr. Mears, have you ever seen how building permits are turned in Williamsburg County?
No, ma'am, I've never submitted one in Williamsburg County.
Would you like a picture to see how we submit it?
I assume by hand and with a lot of paper.
No, Mr. Mears, there's actually a blue trash can in the middle of the hall, and it actually says on it, building permits and plans go here.
Ma'am, is that a question?
Mr. Mears, were you aware that in Williamsburg County, building plans are submitted via a trash can in the middle of the hall?
Oh, ma'am, I'd be very disappointed if I have to pay a $20,000 fee to the county, and that's what they do with it.
Well, if you'd like to see the picture, I'll give it to you. Do you know how many people work in that office?
I've spoken to 2 personally, but I can't comment if there are more. And I know the county has suggested to me that they will outsource this work to a third party, given that their staff has no experience in approving a solar project. Whether they do it or not, I cannot comment, but that's what's been expressed to me.
Trying to figure out how to ask this as a question. Were you aware that you have more information than the private citizen in Williamsburg County?
I would hope so. I'm the developer of the project.
No, I meant in reference to how things are conducted.
Oh, no, I do not know that.
Line 18. Has Farmers Telephone agreed to contract their services with the fiber optic?
They have not agreed to it, nor have we approached them. But they are, I will tell you, I have had conversations with them, and they are honestly wonderful to work with. They were very supportive of giving us fiber optic service, and were very excited about the opportunity to sell us that service as a business.
To you as a business?
Well, not me, but the project company.
Okay. Page 7, line 1. Again, I don't think we ever identified what are the 3 parcels which actually total 4,700 acres.
That's correct, and give me just a second because I have that answer prepared for you. They are Williamsburg County parcel numbers 45-446-005, which is 37 acres. Williamsburg County parcel number 45-446-031 for 37 acres. And Williamsburg County parcel 45-446-003 for 4,624.8 acres.
Will you repeat the last 3 digits? 45-46-.
003 for 4,624.8 acres, which is one of the largest parcels I've ever seen in my life.
I know, scares me too. All right, underneath, line 4, it says may result in additional acreage affected by the project. Does that mean that in addition to those 3 parcels, there are other parcels that might one day become a part of this project?
No, ma'am. It says that was in reference to the 1/3 of the land being covered with solar, and it was some of the land adjacent to the solar. As you would understand, that trees act as shade, and we may need to clear more than just the area that is covered in solar panels. It would not. I am not referencing parcels. These are the only parcels that, if this commission saw fit to approve this application, we would have permission to build on, and they would give me approval on.
Okay, line 10.
Oh.
This site was selected due to the availability of 230 kV transmission lines.
Yes, ma'am.
It didn't have anything to do with the fact that this was Inca's forest land that could easily be cut?
No, ma'am. My mandate was to evaluate, partly, not that it could be cut, but the part you said about it was Inca's land, yes. The job I was tasked with was to go through all of Inca Investments forestry assets, that is the entity which owns the land, and to evaluate all of their land holdings and see which ones I thought had potential to develop solar on. The 230 kV line was the deciding factor of, okay, there's a 230 kV line that can be used. It's very simple logic in the sense of, I'm just a person trying to sell something to somebody, and if I can't get my product to market, it's not worth anything. So that's why I need that transmission line. And also, I also hoped that there would not be many other solar projects on that 230 kV line.
Well, in reference to that, when Mr. Torini asked you about producing solar, I think I remember that you said, or what did you mean when you said no one has to buy it?
Nobody is legally required to buy the power generated from this project, which basically means if we never find a off-taker, or someone who was willing to buy the power, this project will never get built.
I wondered about that.
Yes.
Did you realize there was one in South Carolina that was built and never got turned on?
I'm not aware of any such project. The only ones I'm familiar with have been placed into service.
Line 15, you said that you had found no conditions that adversely affected the project's ability to obtain all necessary permits, ... and then down to the number of residents in close proximity. How many close residents are there in close proximity?
Depends on how you define close, but if you would like to do it by 100 feet, there are 4. There's 2 at 25 feet and one at 87, and I don't remember the last one, but there were 4 at less than 100 feet.
I want to borrow your map.
Okay. And as the county ordinance requires, we will be required to, and that's from their residences, just so you know, not from their property lines. As is required by the county ordinance, we are going to be required to not have any solar panels within 300 feet of their houses. And most of those, as the map that was just displayed shows, many of those houses are actually, there's plenty of wetlands between us and them, and those trees will not be cut. And to my comment of there are not many houses on 3 sides of the property, it is other timber companies which own the property, it's non-residential. But where your pin is pointing to there is a cluster of houses, and those are where those houses are close by, but we're going to have to buffer them. There's a wetlands, the property line is actually the center line of the creek that is in the middle of the wetlands, which we are clearly those are clearly jurisdictional wetlands. We are not going to be able to touch them. We're going to we're both required by, we're going to leave them as a buffer so that they're as required by this county ordinance, and probably even further than the county ordinance requires, because the wetlands are so big.
Okay. Do you know the names specifically of these people?
I have not cross-referenced, I have not looked them up in the county records, no.
Okay. So do you know that this is the Charles Davis family?
No, ma'am, I do not know that.
Do you know that this is a black family?
No, ma'am, did not know that either.
Did you know that there's such a thing as environmental racism?
I have heard that concept presented before, ma'am.
If you will look, would you consider that this family is basically going to be, even with buffers, is going to be surrounded?
If there was a question there, you made the statement that we would be surrounding them with solar. There are, I think, at least 16 parcels in that area, and that we would not even be adjacent to them we'd only be adjacent to them on one side, so it would be impossible for us to surround them. Also, just from a layout perspective, which you questioned earlier about the layout, you were questioning about whether it was labeled correctly. We're going to try to keep as much of the project to the south as possible so that we stay away from them, because our point of interconnection is down to the south. And I want to minimize my cost.
Have you notified the Davis family?
As Ms. Reesar mentioned, we have not done any public outreach on this project other than the SSRC filing, which we conducted, or which was done before the county, I believe she said May of 2023, though I believe the document was actually signed in April of 2023. Because we like to come to people with a project that we know where we're building and we know how we are buffering them. Obviously, the county ordinance establishes minimum requirements, which we intend to follow.
Yes, those minimum requirements are interesting. Did you realize that in the vegetative buffer that the age of the tree at adult height is not noted? Let me say it and then ask the question. In other words, if Quercus virginiana, which is live oak, we all know how long that takes to grow. So if by chance you decided to do something different than Williamsburg County, you would still be following the ordinance by putting out a Walmart 3-gallon bucket that would take 100 years to grow. Did you realize that was in the ordinance?
Well, the ordinance, and I have it here in front of me, is it has to be able to grow to a minimum height of 15 feet. It does not establish, as you correctly point out, a time frame in which it has to do that. But that is what the ordinance says.
Line 19. Inverters, project substation, or utility substation. What type of fencing do you plan to use?
Sorry, can you give me that reference again?
Page 7, line 20.
Yes,
Now-
ma'am. Fencing. So fencing, let's first why do I have to put fencing around it at all? That is required under one of the IEEE requirements that this cannot be a public access facility. Therefore, fencing is required around all solar and all generating plants as a general matter. So that is why we have to put up fencing. Are you asking me for the fencing specifically around the panels or the substation? Or both?
Yeah, you can do both, but I was really thinking about the National Safety Code fencing and how some areas, maybe not South Carolina, but they are requiring the fencing be so many feet off of the ground so that small animals it's called permeable fencing.
Yes, ma'am. I'm very familiar with permeable fencing. It is incorrect to state that they require it to be off the ground. What it actually is that the holes in the fence are larger, so it allows larger animals to pass through than, chain link fence. The holes, 2 inches. I mean, that doesn't allow much through, but it's, the kind of, I call it looks like cattle fencing, though it's just not as thick, and the holes are simply, 4-inch square, which allow much larger animals, including somehow coyotes can get through those holes. Foxes and other animals can get through them. That is correct. That is an option that this project may pursue.
May pursue.
We have made no final decisions on what type of fencing we're going to use.
Will the public have any input into that?
The short answer is no. Only the building. Our next step would be to submit our plans, our construction drawings, to the county. And if the county were to change their mind on what type of fence they would require, that's up to the county board of supervisors.
Are you aware if we have a planning commission or not?
I actually asked the same question. I am told that you do have a planning commission, though I have never done anything with it.
Do you find that odd?
That's, I guess, subjective, whether it's odd or not, but I find it, I'm not exactly sure, in a county that doesn't have zoning, I'm not exactly sure what a planning commission would do. So I don't know if I find it odd or not. It's just, what do they do?
Line 20. When you say civil infrastructure, will you define that?
Oh, yes, I forgot to do that earlier. Yes, we install roads, stormwater ponds, because we are required to mitigate the flow of water off the site to the same level as it would have been as if it had remained in timber, so that we do not release stormwater and sediment into the waters of the U.S. as an EPA requirement enforced by the South Carolina DHEC, though they just changed their name, forgive me. I think it's DES now. That actually is the biggest piece of civil infrastructure you will see on this site is that. Beyond that, we will have roads, only the roads to the inverters will generally be gravelled. All other places we go will just be driving over grass. There's generally we try to limit the grading, and these sites are this site, generally speaking, is very flat.
Okay. Well, the reason why I was asking that, how many workers per day do you think will be in this area?
I have not done a estimate of that, but just from experience, it's probably going to be close to 600.
Well, that's why I was asking the question, because are you aware that other counties have actually rejected plans where the infrastructure for the county was not ready to handle such a project?
I see on the map you're pointing to a state road, so I hope that the state road be sufficient to handle several hundred cars a day. I'm not exactly sure what other infrastructure they would need. Obviously, I'm sure there are many hotels that would love to rent them rooms.
Were you aware there are no hotels in that area?
Well, that's going to mean they're going to be driving a long distance, and unfortunately, the county will be losing out on tax revenue. We will be establishing a laydown yard, which is basically a good chunk of which will be used as a giant parking lot for the workers when they come to site every day.
So how long could construction actually take once you start?
The short answer is depends on how much of a hurry we're in. Solar projects are built sequentially. You can build them very fast or very slow. I would estimate that somewhere between a year and 18 months is what I would reasonably expect for work on site to be happening. That will be the time frame where there will be actual physical labor on site. That does not include the clearing and grubbing, which is more of a separate activity.
Who does the clearing and grubbing permit?
What permit are you referring to, ma'am?
Is there a DHEC land disturbance permit for clearing and grubbing?
The South Carolina Department of ES, Environmental Services, which is what they're now called, it is of their opinion that they have jurisdiction over this matter, but the permit covers nothing more than storm runoff, as we mentioned. We are not allowed to. All we are doing is cutting the trees and removing the stumps. We are not grading it or doing anything else to the ground when we are doing clearing and grubbing. I will say that agricultural activities are exempt from DHEC permits, as are silvicultural activities, but amusingly, it is DES's position that if you convert from silviculture to agriculture, it is somehow they do have jurisdiction.
Say it again.
It is their opinion that when you convert from silviculture, i.e. growing trees, to agricultural, i.e. growing hay or other feed crops, you are required to get a permit.
So what type of permit would you think this site should have?
Well, what I think is irrelevant. What is relevant is that the SC DHEC has regulatory authority according to their belief, and therefore we have to get a stormwater permit from them to do the clearing and grubbing.
Isn't South Carolina DHEC now South Carolina Department of Environmental Services? Aren't they jurisdictionally a part of the EPA National?
I have no idea. I know EPA establishes the requirements, but I have seen very different interpretations of these same rules, as I'm sure you have as well.
So what do you think would take precedence? A local permit to grub and clear or SCDES?
I'm not aware of any county permits required to clear and grub. So therefore, there is nothing to take precedence over SC DHEC.
So what you're saying is basically on this small rural community are you saying that on this small rural community that is very muchly black in percentage, that over how many hundred would descend upon them?
I think we've mentioned that they will not be, when you say descend upon them, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, because as you mentioned, there are no hotels in the county, so they're not going to be living there.
But they're going to be going and coming to work, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I hope they show up.
600 to 800? Is that what you said?
I believe I said 600, ma'am.
Right. Okay, I'm on page 8. I'd like to talk about inverters.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of best research practices and how it is very important that the inverters be placed in the overall site plan to reduce the noise?
I think I stated I believe they should be in the center of the project area, as both cheaper and minimizes noise.
Right. What other noise do you anticipate will happen during this construction?
Noise during construction. The primary noise during construction is pile driving, which is where we basically take an I-beam and we hit it with a giant hammer and we push it into the ground.
Right.
And I will tell you that is quieter than the silvicultural activities that currently go on site when we are cutting trees.
Mr. Mears, is that what you told me earlier in a conversation we had almost a year ago?
Yes, we did have a conversation almost a year, or well, it was actually of January of this year, and I did try to follow up with you on that conversation, but you never responded to my voicemails. So yes, I am well aware that I did reach out to you many times. As to my recollection of what I said, I probably said the exact same thing, that the cutting of timber is the loudest activity that results. Pile driving is not nearly as loud as those big saw blades they use to cut pine trees.
Well, if I remember correctly, you used the term unbearable.
I don't know why I would do that, because I've lived next to it. I own timberland and I have lived next to it, or have stayed next to it, and it's loud, yes. Is it unbearable? No. Is it done by right in the state of South Carolina? The answer is yes.
And does the Williamsburg County Solar Ordinance address noise during construction?
One moment. No, ma'am. It only applies once the facility becomes fully operational.
So possibly unbearable during construction. Okay.
Ma'am, I have done this previously on a previous project where the concern about noise from pile driving has been brought up, and have done prior analysis. If you'll give me just a second to find my prior analysis about the noise of pile driving as a function of distance. The short of the answer to your question is, ma'am, unless you are given that we have to be 100 feet from the property line, and that's to the fence, and the then within the fence we're further away, and there will be trees left over between where you are, that the sound dissipates as the square of distance. The sound dissipates very dramatically with distance, and I believe it's by 200 feet is no louder than that 60-mile-per-hour car we were referring to earlier. But
Okay.
can't find it.
Could you describe the peak efficiency of these solar panels?
Sorry, I actually just found that chart, so to give you reference, it is at 100 feet, it is the equivalent of a phone ringing at, or is that the lawnmower? Anyways, it's either the phone ringing or the lawnmower, I can't really tell.
Is that OSHA?
That is, well, yes, the calculations were done by OSHA, or per the OSHA standards, yes. It's
Okay.
noise as a function of distance is pretty easy. Sorry. What was your next question? Sorry, I missed that.
Okay. Let me phrase it a different way. At the peak efficiency of these particular solar panels, what percentage of power will you be receiving? So my question would be like, if the Hubble space solar cells are at 30% efficiency, what are these?
As I've mentioned, we have not selected the panels as of yet. The short answer of it is, well, the generic answer is we're not allowed to hit the grid, or we're not allowed to generate more than 249 megawatts. The actual panel peak efficiency,
On a good day.
well, so there are standard test conditions, and those standard test conditions are 1,000 watts per meter squared, 25 degrees Celsius, and 0 wind speed. At those standard conditions, which is where we do all of our testing in the solar industry, the peak efficiency of different solar panels today, I can't comment on what we're going to use because that'll be in the future, varies between about 24.7% and 25.5%. That's what I could buy today. I can't comment on what's going to be available in the future.
So per solar panel is 24% efficiency.
I said 24.8 was the minimum I said, I believe.
That ain't real good. Are you familiar with the urban heat island effect? This is a documented thing.
Yes, ma'am. Everybody knows that if you got in the middle of a Walmart parking lot, it's a lot warmer. Yes.
Do you think this scientifically documented phenomena is possible in a solar utility scale project?
I've had that question asked to me many times, and my answer to this is the same amount of sunlight is hit. So we only cover, so we said we're going to use 1,500 acres roughly, or, you know, a third of the site, which let's just round it to 1,500 just to make the math easy. Of that, solar panels are actually only going to cover roughly, their surface area will only be equivalent to a third of that, so roughly 500 acres. The other 1,000 acres is going to be grass. So the answer to your question, no, I do not believe there will be significant heat islanding because most of the area will still be grass, and the same amount of sunlight will be hitting the surface of the earth whether or not the solar panels are there. So will the panels heat up? The answer is yes. They get up to about, depending on what the weather's like, but I could see them here in South Carolina probably getting up to about 40 degrees centigrade, which is what, 110, 112 degrees Fahrenheit. So will they be warmer? Yes. Will they create heat islanding? No, because so much of the land around the panels will still be grass.
I sure would. 500-acre Walmart parking lot would be kind
But
of
it's not continuous. That's the difference. We have basically we have the panels, then we have two widths of the panels, and then we have another panel. So there's a long area of grass in between the rows of panels.
So no following of the Solar Habitat Act. You're gonna mow?
I'm not, okay, you're saying.
The Solar Habitat Act of South Carolina, where pollinators, native grasses, between the arrays. So you're saying.
I have not said anything on that act yet, but what's your
Okay, would
question?
you like to comment?
We have not decided whether we are going, to what degree we will follow the South Carolina Pollinators Act. For one, that act does not actually require us to do pollinators underneath the solar panels. It mainly is focused, the pollinators on the edge areas. Do we have to mow? The short answer is something has to be done to keep the grass down. I would love to put sheep in there, but unfortunately, there's not an existing, how should I say, herder in the Williamsburg area, and we'd probably have to start incrementally. And even when you raise sheep in solar farms, they only can do about 80% of the grass, quote unquote, mowing. You still need a mower to do the other 20%. And I will tell you, in Virginia and North Carolina, there are numerous solar projects where we actually raise sheep in the solar array. So I'm optimistic about that. I hope we can do it, find somebody to work with locally and be able to raise sheep, and it will work out well, but it will probably start incrementally and grow with time. In the meantime, yes, we will have to mow it because there's no other really way of keeping the grass down.
Okay, line 9, the project will pay for the components. Is Inca IRI project Kingstree East 230, are you applying for green energy grants?
I'm not sure what those are, so I cannot comment.
Renewable energy grants?
Yes, what are those? I do not know what those are. And what page were we on, by the way?
Line 9,
Of what page?
8. So no green money is going toward this project.
So you're asking me who will pay for these project components? As I pre-testified, the project will be paying for these components. The project LLC will be responsible for paying for everything, as I've said several times, including the Santee Cooper switching station.
Without grant money.
I'm not sure what grants you're referring to, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Line 13. You may have already responded to this, and if you have, I apologize. Is this Hemingway line currently standing, or it has to be built?
Yes, ma'am. That's the transmission line that's actually shown on this map that you have in front of me on the environmental background. But yes, it currently exists. We are not building any new transmission lines. The most we are building is our project substation is going to be as close as Santee Cooper will let us be to their switching station, and at most there will be one span of 230 kV line connecting our project substation to the switching station. I wish we could do it by bus bar, but we have not gotten to the point in design where we can even have that conversation. We would like our fences to be adjacent to each other so we could just do a bus bar and have no spans of 230 kV line.
Are you familiar with the United States concerns about electromagnetic fields with increased voltage, EMFs?
Ah, yes. EMF. So were you referring to electromagnetic or electrical and magnetic? Those are, even though they both use the abbreviation EMF, those are two separate topics. So which one of those two are you referring to?
Define them and I'll tell you.
Electromagnetic waves are basically something where you can use an antenna to maximize the, like a radio tower, you can send out a signal with distance. Electrical and magnetic are reference to the electrical characteristics and the magnetic characteristics of an appliance.
Have you ever ridden a horse under a high tensile wire?
I've never ridden a horse under one, but I have walked under one many times.
Have you ever heard anybody describe what happens when you ride a horse under a high tensile wire?
No, ma'am.
Do you know if any of these residents have horses that they might want to ride underneath?
Well, if they were riding underneath this high voltage line today, they would be trespassing, so I'm not exactly sure what else to tell them.
Well, the reason I asked the question is I have one of those on my property, and I am concerned about it.
You have
Not this one. All right. I think that's probably. Oh, last question. Were you aware that some states are now requiring solar developers turn into some regulatory entity the list of potentially hazardous materials in their contracts? Now, I did not ask you. I asked you, were you aware that some states have regulatory entities that are asking for, and it could be a county with a local planning commission. So I'm not saying just state or national entities.
I believe we are required to report all hazardous materials. There's some permit. I would have to ask who it is, but if we bring hazardous materials on a site, we have to fill out all kinds of paperwork. That I know. Now, who that goes to, forgive me for saying, I do not know.
So you are saying that if there are hazardous materials in the solar panels, that you have to report that to someone. And I have one other question.
If they are hazardous materials, you are correct.
Do you know if yours have hazardous material?
I know of no solar panels that have hazardous materials.
Okay, last question. Does the Kingstree East LLC carry some type of insurance, or whoever is going to own the solar project, so that if material from the solar project comes over onto their property, that any damages that are incurred, and I'm thinking about hurricanes. So if something comes loose, fencing, downlighting, solar panels, inverters, if it comes on my property or Mr. Davis's property, who pays for that?
I am not an insurance expert, but to answer your question about do we carry insurance, the answer is yes. It is required under the interconnection agreement. And if we were to sign the PPA that Santee Cooper had as its model PPA, also required us to carry insurance. As to what would happen if wind blew something into your property, I think most people would call that an act of God, and I don't know how insurance treats that.
I just want to make this statement. I know this is not a question, but
No, ma'am.
okay, last question. You quoted the number of panels that will be involved in this project. How many panels?
Sorry. I estimated if we were to use the Meyerberger 570 watt panels, we estimated that there would be 567,900 panels. That is correct.
Do you know where the closest recycling facility is for these panels?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Or, well, I do not know where the closest is, but I have looked up recycling facilities in this area. There's one, one I believe is closest is in Salisbury, North Carolina, which is just north of Charlotte.
Is Spartanburg.
Okay.
But my question is, who's responsible for transporting those there and being sure they make it there and not to our local dump?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you asking me at the end of the useful life?
Well, I should have asked it a different way. You got how many hundred thousand?
567,000.
Okay. And do they ever need to be replaced?
The answer is hopefully no.
What could cause them to have to be replaced?
Oh, there's a multitude of reasons. I mean, some of them just electrically short out, which is annoying. We've had to replace them. Well, South Carolina does not get hail, at least not to the degree of other places, but there's a famous example of a solar farm called Midway Solar in Texas, where 3-inch hail fell and caused a $70 million claim on the insurance industry. In that case, that caused solar panels to fail. Some panels have failed because the back sheet, which is in older designs of panels, not the ones we're planning on using here, you basically had a piece of glass, the silicon conductor, and then you had a back sheet, which was a piece of plastic. Some of that plastic has, in certain models, has basically peeled off. That required them to be replaced. But as a general matter, there is no reason to presume a panel will need to be replaced during its during the 35-year life of the project.
Were you aware that the SSRC is for 50 years, not 30?
You're referring to the, well, I'm not sure where the 50 years comes in because our tax abatement, or as is specified, only covers 3 10-year periods. So it may reach out further for projects that are put on later, but the actual abatement only covers 3 10-year periods. After that, we are taxed at, well, however solar is taxed in this state. If you don't have an abatement. I can't tell you off the top of my head.
I just want to be sure that this is recorded accurately. Did you say that you were not aware that South Carolina had hail?
No, I said you do not have hail of 2 to 3 inches. If you look at a hail map of South Carolina, you generally only have hail of the probability of you having hail in South Carolina, specifically Williamsburg County, within a site within 25 miles of a given point is the probability of having greater than 1 inch hail is 1 day per year. That is, if you want to go look it up, that's what it says.
But that 1 day per year could be catastrophic, correct?
No, ma'am, because our solar panels are required to get UL listing. Of course, we are only going to buy UL listed solar panels. The UL testing requires that panels will survive 10 strikes by 1 inch hail, and that's when you're perpendicular to the panel. As I mentioned earlier, our intention during a hailstorm, you rotate them out of horizontal, and so you're at the maximum angle. That way, the force of the impact will be it would take 300 times that force of impact to damage the panels.
South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff.
No questions.
Commissioner questions? Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
I just have a few questions. So, has your company or this project had an environmental justice survey conducted utilizing the EPA's EJ screen to determine impacts to sensor blocks?
We had an environmental justice analysis done, but I cannot tell you whether we met all those requirements you just said. I know we did an environmental justice survey, yes.
Okay. And was that mentioned in somebody's testimony, or do you happen to know?
I don't know off the top of my head if it was mentioned anywhere.
All right. So, you mentioned 567,000 Meyer Burger solar panels.
Yes, sir.
But my understanding is you haven't definitely decided that that's what's going to be used. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you know where those are made?
Goodyear, Arizona.
All right. And you mentioned the pilings that are going to support these things.
The piles, yes.
Any idea how many of those it will take?
I'd have to do a bit of math, but let's just suffice to say in the 100,000 range. It'd be measured in the hundreds of thousands. It'd probably be about 100,000, give or take. It's a lot.
Okay. And any idea where those might come from?
Usually wherever there's a metal fabricator these are nothing more than I-beams, so they usually come from, wherever somewhere. As local as you can get them, because shipping costs are very expensive on those things.
Okay. And I thought I heard you say that there may be some specific specifications that they would need to meet due to whatever the soil.
Yes, the corrosion resistance is what I was referring to. Do we need to put any type of coating on them to ensure that they last longer? That is answered by the basically the soil samples we take, analyze the corrosivity of the soil, and we may or may not. There are multiple ways of dealing with that. You either make the I-beam just thicker so it takes longer to corrode, or you can put different coatings onto the I-beam so that they don't corrode. Either one's an option. Depends on whatever's most cost effective for that given site.
Okay. And all of that may impact where they end up coming from, I suppose.
Probably, yes.
I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. We've been going for about 2 hours now, and we have more commissioner questions. We're gonna take a 15-minute break and come back about 3:20 and continue at that point. Welcome back. We are continuing the application of Kingstree East 230 for Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and necessity for the construction and operation of a 249 megawatt solar and battery facility in Williamsburg County, South Carolina. It's docket number 2024-203E. We are presently okay. Okay. Well, I just won't read it anymore. I'll just say we're back in docket number. Five, four, three, two, one. We are back on the record in docket number 2024-203E. We are in commissioner questions at this point, and would ask it. Commissioner Belsu, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for being here today. I'm down here on the end. I know it's hard to find us sometimes. Mr. Mayor, if this application is approved, can you tell me how the project would, would the project continue to work with SHPO should any materials be unearthed during the construction?
Oh, yes, ma'am, we have to.
Okay, and how would the project work with the Corps of Engineers or any other entity with regard to any wetlands on the property?
Well, I'm definitely not the wetlands expert, but here is what the intention is that once we receive the delineation concurrence, we will then need to talk with the Corps to determine which of those bodies or wetlands are actually jurisdictional wetlands, which would require us to submit either a AGD letter, which is I don't even know what that stands for, but it's an AGD letter. You get that from the Corps, and they tell you what is jurisdictional and what is not jurisdictional. We cannot do anything in a jurisdictional wetland without a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. And that's pretty much what I can tell you. That's our plan. We're not planning on doing anything other than what is we're allowed to do.
Correct.
That's the short answer.
Okay, I don't mean correct, but thank you. And with regard to the stormwater, I know there's been some discussion and filings with regard to Department of Environmental Services, and if I call them DHEC, I'm sorry, I'm just not used to the change yet. There would be continued work with them, is that correct?
Oh, yes, ma'am. We haven't even filed anything for this project for them. So, yes, we're going to have to file for them at least twice, most likely, get stormwater permits from them.
And it was brought out on cross-examination about a possible Carolina Bay there. Are you familiar with Carolina Bays?
It was that Gateway Bay. The name appears on a picture, but I can't tell you more than that. I've never. It's just that is from the USGS map. All I can tell you is that is how that physical feature is labeled as. Was it Gateway Bay? I can make no comment about anything else about it.
So you don't know if it's already been drained or disturbed in any manner?
I know on our wetland surveys it is part of a wetland, but other than that, I don't know anything else
So
about
if it's part of a wetland, it would not be something where y'all would be constructing anything anyway, is that
Oh,
right?
no, ma'am.
Okay.
I mean, it's clearly a jurisdictional wetland. There's no question.
And with regard to, okay, I'll leave that one alone. And with regard to this, you were asked about the Solar Habitat Act of South Carolina. Are you familiar with that?
I've read it, yes, ma'am.
And is that a voluntary or a mandatory
It is a
requirement?
voluntary.
Okay.
But as I said, I'm personally more optimistic on getting sheep grazing under there because it offers a better economic, it works better economically than doing that, and it's actually very good for the soil. So that's what I'm optimistic on getting done.
Okay.
But we have not made any decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Caston.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Circling back to the sizing, and, I think some questions that Dr. Lane had asked. As I understand it, this project will be using 352
Inverters.
TNMIC,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yep.
We're Ninja inverters, I read.
Yep. That is a class of, yes, the T-Mic is a Japanese company.
Yeah. And I think it was PV 840. PV 840 something.
Yeah.
Is that 840? Is that 840 capable of 840
Kilowatts.
kilowatts?
I want to just check to make sure I can't remember if it's 740 or 840, and I just want to make sure we're going to say it correctly for the record.
Well, I can show you the page. I had
Yeah,
it
it's
marked.
in here somewhere. T-Mic 840, yes, they are 840 inverters. That means 840 kW. We put 4 of them together on a pad, and then they go into one medium voltage transformer that is rated at 3,360 kVA.
All right, so there's 352 of them.
Yeah, in groups of 4, yes.
And if you do that math now, that they would be capable, if I'm doing it right,
Oh, yes.
roughly about 297 megawatts. I mean, at least the capability to go.
Yes. Our AC capability is greater than the 249 megawatts that we're allowed to submit to the grid. That's done so that we can, one, inverters have a bad habit of failing, and so it's for downtime. 2, we have losses between the inverter and the point of interconnection, so we don't want to have, how should I say, we don't want to have a capacity that we never use, so we oversize it. And also, the utility requires, or not the utility, I guess it's the utility, the interconnecting group, well, yeah, I'll just use utility. The transmission authority, there we go. The transmission authority requires us to provide reactive power, and because of that, 840 would be at unity power factor, and since we have to provide reactive power, when we provide reactive power, our real power drops, so we have to be above that in order to meet the requirements of the utility. But anyways, I'm sure you guys know we're required by statute to provide between 0.95 lead lag in reactive power.
Okay. And the approximately 568,000, 567,900 Meyer Burger solar panels. I heard the conversation, question and answers, but I didn't follow it all.
Okay.
And as I understand it, it's not final, but I was trying to follow it. So relative to those panels, the 567,900 panels,
Mhm.
how much can one of those panels, Meyerberger solar panels from Arizona, what is the capacity of one of those panels?
Yeah, you're asking me what the DC capacity of the entire project is?
Yes.
Got it. It would be 570 times that 5600, which I unfortunately do not have in my notes, but that would be the math. So you would take that 567,900, multiply it by 570, and that would be the DC rating of the project. But we will clearly never deliver that much power, and honestly, we can't, because it's that as I mentioned, those are tested at standard test conditions, and I'll just say South Carolina is not the sunniest place in the world, and we almost never get to 1,000 watts per meter squared in this state.
Did you just say South Carolina is not the sunniest place in the world?
Relative to Arizona, no, sir, it is not.
Yeah. Everybody can't be as fortunate as we are.
I think we could take that comment several different ways.
Are you familiar with Are you familiar with NERC?
Oh yeah, we have to we have to follow NERC requirements. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with I guess the studies and reports they've done recently on the inverters like Odessa, Texas, and those where they've had some tripping out and that sort of thing? Are you familiar with those studies or reports?
I am very familiar that there's. You're referring to the what was that superstorm where they had the cold snap in Texas, and some of the inverters, including, unfortunately, the project we're associated with in Texas, went offline when they were not supposed to. So yes, I'm familiar with that and the reliability requirements. Yes, we are, and I am very well aware that both Duke Energy and Santee Cooper have adjusted their what they call inverter-based resource requirements to comply with NERC that we have to follow, and it requires a great deal more modeling. So yes, familiar with it to that degree. I don't know if you want more answer than that.
Thank you. I needed that information. I appreciate that, because I think that was one of the recommendations, one of the many recommendations of NERC to do such as.
Oh yeah, I mean we're required to do it. The number of studies that we're required and the utilities are requiring of us has greatly increased over the last 2 years since that cold snap in Texas.
Well, having said that, and with the inverters, the Ninja inverters, I think you're proposing, do you have any concerns with the risk and reliability of those inverters, the inverter-based solar systems currently?
You asked me if I have any concerns. Any concerns, of course. The inverters are the single most important part of a solar facility. They are the one component that actually has something that, I will say, quote unquote, does something. So when they fail, they will take out a part of the solar facility. I'm involved and have been involved with enough solar projects. I can believe any inverter is perfect today. 10 years down the road, I might be singing a different tune. We've had my experience. This makes me feel old, but I've had facilities where the inverter that we bought when originally fails, and there's no way to get spare parts because the company goes out of business. So I am always concerned about the inverter. That's the part that scares me the most about any of these projects. So yes, do I have concerns? Do I believe T-Mike which is basically part of Toshiba, is as good an inverter company there is? The answer is also yes. So I like to believe it, but my experience has told me that there are going to be failures in inverters, and we're going to have to replace parts in them for sure. Hopefully not as bad as we, hopefully less than some I've experienced in other places.
Well, you answered my next two questions, so I don't have to ask them.
Okay.
So I appreciate that. And from your question and answers from Dr. Lane, I had some follow-ups on that, like relative to the RFP. I think y'all had discussed. You said it asked for solar. Did I hear you say it also asked for batteries?
It did not ask for batteries.
Okay. It was only solar.
It was a solar only RFP.
Okay. And y'all talked about, I think, the carbon offset and the tonnage.
Yes, sir.
Is that based on, I guess, the offset, the difference that you're saying, is that based off of is that based on like a gas plant of equivalent size? How do you do that?
So how does that model work? Sorry.
As simply as possible.
Okay. So this is the EPA, Avertini model. How do you say it? Averti? Oh, you can't speak. Averti. Anyways, model. I unfortunately did not write that down on my notes page. How it basically seems to work is it takes the actual power plants in the geographic region and it appears to run a simulation over time of a load, both a load and a generation model. I mean, it was a really cool model. I could basically I could click into it. I ran it for South Carolina. Actually, it's the Carolinas. They're grouped together and how this model works. And it estimated which plants would not be generating power if the solar was generating power. So it was actually suggesting, we're suggesting these plants will be turned down to account for the solar generation coming up. The model is made by the EPA and actually Synapsys, which is the company that our next witness works for. I have no idea if she has any familiarity with that model, but they're the ones who created it. So I'm fascinated by this model. I have not read the user manual, but I did read the instructions on just how to input and output, but not how it worked. But it appears to be a fully functional, it assumes a dispatch and then it assumes it reduces it. So it actually calculated the marginal reduction of carbon for each increase in solar, which I found fascinating. Sorry.
Well, you're a mechanical engineer. I'd be surprised if you weren't fascinated by that.
Yeah, I'm a thermo junkie, so yes.
A little confused about the French bachelor, though.
Well, that's the easiest answer.
Okay.
You've been in a mechanical engineering department, you know why.
You guys also talked about flooding.
Yes, sir.
And thinking about that, if the substation or other parts, maybe the panels, but substation in particular, was flooded, who would rebuild that or rehab it or pay for that? Who would be responsible for that?
Well, I'll address, so there's the project substation and then there's the switching station that's owned by Santee Cooper. The project substation, obviously the project is responsible. The Santee Cooper switching station, we are required to pay a maintenance fee. Forgive me, I believe it is this commission that establishes what that rate is. And it is basically that covers, we're paying the operations and maintenance. We pay for it every year, and then they, loosely use those funds to cover the maintenance on that. So the short answer is ratepayers should pay nothing, and if the rates are set correctly, ratepayers should pay nothing, and we're the ones who pay for it if it got flooded or any other damage. I don't know if insurance would kick in at that point. That I don't know.
And I think I understood in the dialogue that I guess the design is based on the 100-year flood maps.
Mm-hmm.
which haven't been updated since 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And, thinking about that, I know 2015 comes to mind that we've had some significant
Yes,
storms. and
several have
floods,
hurricanes that come through here.
especially in that area.
Yeah.
And up in our area too. Was any of that considered? I mean, regardless of what the maps say, I guess what I'm saying is the company not concerned about putting a lot of money in stuff that.
So to answer your question is there in essence you're getting to, is there a safety factor involved? The answer is yes. I mean, in the sense of flooding. So let's start by the various components. I mean, the panels, they are actually 4 feet off the ground. If there's a concern about flooding, we'll put ultrasonic sensors on the actual trackers, and that will cause them to go horizontal. Now, we just had a discussion earlier that that's a bad position for them to be in if the wind starts blowing, but as I'm sure everyone in this room has experienced, usually the flooding happens a few days after the hurricane. It's, because it takes a while for the water to flow you get the flooding. So basically you end up, the panels can survive with almost 4 feet of water underneath them before it hits anything that's going to affect anything. Let's see, the inverters, as I mentioned, they're on skids, so they're off the ground, typically at least 18 to 20 inches, and we actually purposely try to put them in higher ground. Often when you see a picture of an inverter, it's actually up on a mound of basically gravel that's been pushed up a bit so that they're higher up. And the substations, different people have different standards, but yes, they are generally, I just happen to be familiar with Duke Energy's standards. They require it to be 3 feet above any floodplain. If there is no floodplain, they require you to build it 3 feet above that existing grade. So, yes, most things are built above, but to answer your question, no, we have not specifically modeled it, but we have anticipated it in the design of the facility.
Good, and if something bad happened, it did get flooded or destroyed, your substation on your property, you're still responsible for it. You got to take care. Okay. 2 more questions, and this was going back to the interchange that you and Dr. Lane had. Thinking about the heat, it made me think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's a parking lot or whether it's a panel, and I think you did say that, they do heat up. They heat up significantly. And just thinking about that, I don't know what effect it would have, but intuitively, is it fair to say that, if you got 500 acres of this panel stuff that heats up significantly, it's going to be hotter than 500 acres of grass?
Of grass, yes, but a highway would, interstate's going to heat up the same way, because, interstates does not, we're designed to transfer those electrons into electricity. 25% of them, roughly, is what that's the efficiency. And the other 75 goes to heat. But, an asphalt parking lot or interstate or anything else, it's going to absorb 100% of that heat, and it's going to get hot too. So it's a relative question. We're not going to have significant areas as opposed to, like an interstate. They're several hundred feet wide, and in cases, and it's uniform and it goes on for a really long distance. Ours are short, discrete. So will it heat up? To your question, yes. Will it be hotter than grass? Yes, because grass transpires, i.e. water evaporates from the grass, which cools the grass down. As a piece of metal and glass, solar panels can't do that. I will tell you, if we could find good ways of keeping solar panels cool, we would use them, because a solar panel performs better at lower temperatures. So if there were a way to do it cost effectively, we would do it.
Thank you. Finally, I think Dr. Lane was asking you about grants, and what I was wondering relative to this project, thinking about whether it's the IRA, ILJ, tax credits and this kind of thing. is the company considering those
Oh, of
type
course.
things? That's what it's not. Well, Mr. Mears, I think that's it, and good luck to the Wolfpack this weekend.
Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good afternoon, Mr. Mears.
Good afternoon.
You talked some about Virginia and conditional use permits.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that makes me want to revisit the question of comprehensive plans and zoning.
Yes.
So what would you like to add to my understanding of that from Williamsburg County's perspective?
I have very limited knowledge, and I cannot say I understand it all. That's the first thing. There does appear to be a comprehensive plan in Williamsburg County. I know when I went to go Google it and try to find it, they are currently soliciting bids for somebody else to revise the comprehensive plan. Now,
But you did not find it.
No, I don't think I actually did. So I knew one must exist, but I never actually found one and read it. I have, unlike in Virginia where I could tell you the exact legal bearing that it has, I can't tell you what legal bearing a comprehensive plan has in South Carolina. I have no idea.
Okay. And related to that, it's been talked about the fact that there are requirements for solar arrays to be developed. I think you've mentioned bits and pieces of it, but would you give us a kind of an overview of what that requirement is?
Are you referring to the zoning ordinance in the county?
I think there isn't a zoning ordinance, but I thought there
No,
was.
There is a zoning ordinance, but there is no zoning.
Got it. Okay, so in the zoning ordinance,
Yes.
are there requirements for how to build
Yes, ma'am.
a solar array? And generally, what are those?
Okay. I'm going to go back to my testimony here. Or maybe it's just something I said earlier. But let me just find my notes. This was a question Charlie asked me when I referenced the 100-foot setbacks from the property lines to any building structures, fencing, equipment, or parking structures. The requirement that buffers be between the property line and the fence so that people cannot see the fence, that we have to be 300 feet away from the nearest residence or church, a 50-foot vegetative buffer along property lines, roads, and right-of-ways, anti-reflective coating of solar panels to minimize glare. The noise requirement is in that ordinance. There's actually a requirement that all of our lights be pointed downwards and don't create that light at night. Decommissioning performance guarantee that we have to fund security up front, that we have to provide a decommissioning plan every 5 years from the date we file it. I think that's all the material ones. I've got the ordinance here if we have any other questions.
No, I just appreciate your re-summarizing it and with the additions that you added to that I don't think I heard the first time around. Were you starting to say something?
Yes, I would just want to say that there is a good... The reason for the ordinance, as I understand it, is I will tell you that there is the ugliest solar project I have ever seen in my life in Williamsburg County. And I'm ashamed that was ever built there because since there was no ordinance, somebody took advantage of it and built a project where the fence is on the property line, there's no buffering, it's right across the street from somebody's house, so there was a clear need in this county for a zoning ordinance. So I was very happy when they decided to create one because I'm aware of 3 solar facilities in the county, and that is truly the ugliest solar facility I have seen in my life. So there is I understand the community being concerned because of what had happened for this other facility that we had obviously nothing to do with, but it's horrible.
Okay. And this is picking up on a conversation that you had with Commissioner Belser. Who will be on site that will be the person responsible should an archaeological resource or there be some wildlife issue that arises that is within the scope of your needing to call someone?
When you build a solar farm, you typically have various specializations of labor on site. The one that would generally fall for that, quality control is the most obvious one, but usually there are at least one or two EH&S people, environmental health and safety people, and that falls into their purview of things that they have to watch out for and check, and that's who you have to notify, either the project manager or the environmental health and safety person, who then has to notify the project manager. I will not be that project manager.
And for that reason, how is that person educated to know what to look for?
So that's a really good question, actually. So we have to provide to the contractor every species that we believe may even be in the county to the EPC contractor, the engineering, procurement, and construction contractor. That is a document in the contract. They then are, whoever that person is supposed to be aware of that list and be aware of what they look like. I'm not sure what to say, what they look like. For some of the species, it's easier. Like, you just don't build during these time periods, or the kit swallows, you have to do a survey right before you start construction. That one's easy. But there are I can't think of one, but there could be other species that might just show up. Or, of course, when the really scary one's always if you ever find human remains. That's the big one that you always have to worry about.
Done that.
Yeah, so that would be the big one. We have no reason to believe there are any, but you never know.
Right.
That's why you find them. So it's that person's responsibility, and that's kind of how they know what to look for.
Okay. Switching gears, I understand that batteries are not a part of this particular proposal, but was there any thought on your part as to if it were to be added later? Is the potential there? Is that even a conversation that you all have had?
Is it a conversation that we've had? Of course, yes. Everyone's talking about batteries these days. Everyone likes to talk about batteries, but every market, to use the term loosely, is different, and our battery is valued in the various electrical markets. Is where you quickly arrive. So the answer,
I think I'm asking more spatially than anything else at this point.
No, we have not taken that into any account in our layout or design. That's the answer. So spatially, the answer is no. We've not taken part in that. Have we thought about it? The answer is yes.
Okay. In the conversation that you had with Dr. Lane, at some point today, dredging came up.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any?
No, dredging, I just want to make sure I'm understanding dredging correctly. But if I understand dredging correctly, that's like when you dredge out the intercoastal waterway, you dig up ground.
Well, yeah. The bottom line is there any reference to dredging in your application,
I believe so, because we copied the state law, and I believe it references dredging when we copied the state law, but it's nothing we intend to do. I think because when we asked for the ability to start construction prior to getting your approval at risk, I believe when we copied just that section of law, dredging was included as one of those things. But no, we're not even planning. We're not dredging anything.
Okay. And switching gears again, thinking about floodplains, when you talked about 4 feet off the ground, I understand. What's the ground at from the standpoint of floodplain that you're building on? Is it above the?
So the short answer is we are not building in any existing 100-year floodplain.
Okay. So anything that you're doing would be at a minimum 4 feet. Well, if for the solar panels,
yes,
4 feet, and in the case of inverters, 18 inches.
Yeah.
Above the ground level, which is above the 100-year floodplain.
Yes, all of the ground is above the 100-year floodplain. There is no floodplain, and the hydrology study for this site actually came back very nice. That all the areas where we expected to get more than 3 or 4 feet of water were nicely in wetlands. So, and since we're not building in the wetlands, that makes it very easy.
Do you know where you are related to the 1,000-year floodplain?
No, we have not run. No, we have not run that analysis. No.
Okay.
Yeah,
And one of the things I appreciate about the testimony is Ms. Glick was really clear what she's going to be testifying to related to the 6 statutory mandated findings that we need to look at. The ones that remain are B, the nature of probable impact of the facility. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that you haven't already covered?
I mean, probable impacts. I mean, I think it's good for the county in the sense that we're going to generate, as I said, 4%. We're going to increase their property tax revenue by 4%. I think we are following every single state, federal, and local law to maintain the environment. We're following all the environmental laws and regulations to ensure that this project is, does not adversely affect the environment. So I generally think it's a good thing both for the community and everybody else. I mean, it's a good thing for ratepayers in the sense of, since we're doing this all on our own dime, in essence, ratepayers get a free option to, if they think this project's beneficial to ratepayers, people get to buy it. If they don't, we're the ones that lose money.
Okay. And C is, you've begun to touch on it, the impact of the facility on the environment is justified. And witness Thomas also dealt with that. E is where there is a reasonable assurance that the proposed facility will conform to applicable state and local laws. Really, you just addressed that as well. Thank you, Mr. Mears. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. I would like Mr. Mears, obviously, the state agencies who are responsible for natural resources, environmental matters, they certainly will have access during any of the construction or after.
Yes, they do.
Okay. And regardless of what your expert may or may not find, or what your supervisor, whoever it is, these people will have that access. Our geologists, our state people.
I assume they have, yes. My understanding of the law is if there's an endangered species, we immediately have to this is my understanding of it, and mine's very basic, is if we find a species that is endangered or threatened, we have to go tell the state. And
exactly.
We have to go tell them. Now, what happens after that, I don't know. It depends on the species, and I'm no expert. But we have to go tell somebody.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any redirect?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. You may step down. Thank you. You got one more, don't you, Mr. Trent?
Mr. Chairman, we call Debbie Glick to the stand, and she will be testifying virtually. Good afternoon, Ms. Glick.
Ms. Glick, how are you?
You're going to have to lean into your computer a little and speak extra loud because we've had some volume issues today. Can you do that?
Is this better?
Say that again.
Is this better, or should I switch to headphones?
We need more.
Need you to be a little louder.
Is this better?
You're getting there.
Okay, I'm going to switch to headphones. I don't think I can shout for
Try
more
the
than like 2
headphones.
minutes without losing
We
my
don't want you
voice.
screaming at us.
Yeah.
Okay, now tell us something. Can you hear us? Ms. Glick?
1 second. Nope, they're not connected yet. 1 second.
Okay.
Can you hear me better now?
Much better.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Glick, would you raise your right hand, please, to be sworn? Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. You're a witness, Mr. Torini.
Thank you. Ms. Glick, please tell us your name, occupation, and business address.
Yeah, my name is Debbie Glick. I'm a senior principal at Synapse Energy Economics. The business address is 485 Massachusetts Ave, Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 22 pages of direct testimony pre-filed in this docket?
Yes, I did.
Do you wish to make any changes to your pre-filed testimony?
No, I do not.
If I were to ask you the questions in your pre-filed testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, I move to admit Ms. Glick's direct pre-filed testimony as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony, Ms. Debbie Glick, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Did your testimony have one exhibit marked as DG1, which was your resume?
Yes, that's correct.
Are there any changes we need to make to your resume?
Nope.
Mr. Chairman, I move to admit Exhibit DG1 into evidence.
The pre-filed exhibit of witness Glick identified as DG1. Her resume is marked for identification. We place the record as exhibit number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Glick, please tell us a little bit about your educational background.
Yeah, I have a bachelor's degree from Middlebury College, a master's in science, and a master's in public policy from the University of Michigan.
And just for the sake of rounding out our languages here, you have a minor in Spanish, don't you?
I do have a minor in Spanish. I'm not sure that's super relevant today, but yes.
Well, you know, Ms. Mears, he had a major in French. I'm native Italian. You've got a minor in Spanish. We might get the Romance languages covered here. How about your professional background?
Yeah, I've been a consultant at Synapse for about 6 years. I worked at Rocky Mountain Institute for about 5 or 6 years before that. So I have about 12 years of professional experience in the energy and electricity industry.
Tell us about your work at Rocky Mountain Institute, briefly.
Yeah, I focused on solar, on battery storage, on integrated resource planning in Africa, actually, and then in the United States.
And what about at Synapse? What have you done there?
So I primarily serve as an expert witness in litigated dockets. I have testified in over 60 litigated dockets in more than 20 states across the U.S., focusing mostly on integrated resource planning, on power plant economics, renewable energy economics, power fueled cost dockets, power plant operations.
And are solar plants included in your testimony or in your dockets?
Yes, in a variety of ways. Through resource planning, I've also recently testified in several solar dockets, solar developer dockets in the state of Vermont.
And the dockets that you referenced in in your publications, they're listed on your resume that we admitted into evidence, are they not?
Yeah, there's probably been a few more since that was filed, but yes, it's up to date as of the date it was filed.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move to qualify Ms. Glick as an expert in power plant economics and resource planning.
Any objections? We'll then find her qualified as such. She's testified here several times.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Glick, have you prepared a summary of your testimony for the commission?
Yes, I have.
Could you please give it?
Of course. My direct testimony in this case supports the application of the Kingstree East project in the state of South Carolina. My testimony focuses on how the project meets a demonstrated need based on the long-term resource plans developed by both Santee Cooper and Central Electric Power Cooperative. I find that both utilities have identified incremental solar PV as part of a least cost electricity system for South Carolina, and both utilities have had challenges procuring solar sufficient to meet their solar needs. The state of South Carolina therefore needs developers such as Kingstree East to put forward viable solar projects that can enter into utility requests for proposals. In my testimony, I address the following elements of the Siting Act: the basis of the need for the facility, that the facility will serve the interests of system economy and reliability, that the public convenience and necessity requires the construction of the facility. I also address the requirement that the project be compared to other generation options in terms of cost, reliability, and other regulatory implications deemed legally or reasonably necessary for consideration by the Commission. On need, I find that there is compelling evidence of demand for projects such as Kingstree East from utilities, as well as from corporate and municipal customers in the state. Santee Cooper and Central's IRPs both recommend sustained solar procurement over the next decade. Both IRPs are the result of detailed studies that take into account system economics, reliability, and risk. And Santee Cooper issued an RFP for solar resources in the summer of 2024. In light of recent challenges that utilities have encountered procuring solar, it is even more important for the Commission to remove barriers for the Kingstree East project and other similar solar resources to move forward. On system economy, I find that both Santee Cooper and Central's IRP results indicate that additional solar capacity will provide economic benefit to South Carolina's residents. Both IRPs found that increasing the amount of solar PV on their systems would yield economic benefits for customers. Solar provides consistently low-cost energy, reducing exposure to fuel price volatility. And because solar generation emits no carbon or toxic air pollutants, it provides protection against regulatory costs that are likely to impact fossil resources in the state. On system reliability, I find that the reliability and resource adequacy analysis that Santee Cooper and Central completed as part of their IRPs indicates that adding solar capacity will not have a detrimental impact on system reliability. And in fact, as the utilities complete their plans to retire their legacy fossil plants, their systems will be even better suited to accommodate new renewable capacity. This is consistent with the findings of some peer utilities, some of which already have higher levels of solar generation than Santee Cooper or Central. Therefore, I conclude that the Kingstree East project serves system reliability. On the requirement that the project be compared to other generation options, Santee Cooper and Central's IRPs already evaluated solar PV relative to alternative resource options and found that solar PV was the lowest cost option to meet system need. If the Commission wants the utilities to compare project bids to one another and to other resource options in their planning models, the Commission can order that change in future CPREs. Kingstree East does not have access to competitively sensitive bid data from other developers or data from the utility on alternative resource costs, and therefore cannot perform this analysis itself. Overall, I find that there is a clear demonstrated need for the Kingstree East solar project. I conclude that the public convenience and necessity requires the construction of the project, and I recommend that the Commission approve the CECPN for the Kingstree East project.
Thank you, Ms. Glick. Please answer any questions the interveners may have for you or the commissioners may have.
Thank you, Mr. Trini.
Yes, sir.
As the interveners, environmental services, natural resources, parks, recreation, and tourism, Williamsburg County, Mr. Washington, any questions?
No, sir, Your Honor, I don't have any questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lane, any questions? Turn on your microphone.
I know that you were asked to be an expert witness, but I'm just curious, did you look at any other alternative types of energy other than solar when you did your research?
Can you clarify what you mean by that?
Yeah, did you look at other sources? We've got coal, oil, natural gas. Those are fossil fuels. We've got solar and we've got nuclear. Did you look at any other alternative sources?
So the scope of my analysis was to evaluate this particular project. I have for other projects evaluated the impacts, the environmental impacts, so you could call those the life cycle impacts of solar relative to all of the alternatives you listed, so coal and natural gas in particular. National Renewable Energy Laboratory has done studies on the life cycle total impacts of solar relative to coal and gas, and has found definitively that the environmental impacts from coal and gas are on the order of 10 to 20 times as large as the life cycle impacts on solar, even if you consider disposal of the panels at the end of their life, even if you consider the construction costs, it's still massively less impact for solar.
I see in one of your in your resume, one of your publications, Synapse Energy Economics for Sierra Club. I was just curious. I know the Sierra Club. Do you know what their stance? From what I read, what is their stance on solar in this type of environment?
So I've worked for Sierra Club on dozens of projects, on behalf of them rather. I do not work for Sierra Club, so I don't know what Sierra Club's stance is on solar. Sierra Club also has local chapters and national chapters, so I don't know that. I'm not sure what they would say their stance is. I generally, when I work for Sierra Club, advocate on behalf of or support their advocacy on behalf of renewable energy. So in that way, my work has supported renewable energy on their behalf. I'm not sure what their stated position is.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Officer Regulatory Staff, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner questions?
Or you?
Mr. Caston?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Glick.
Good afternoon.
Just, I guess for my edification, on page 8, lines 20 through 23, you talk about assessments, independent assessments of Santee Cooper, below. I didn't see it, but what independent assessments were you referencing, or where is it?
Sorry, you were a little bit fast for me. Could you tell me again what line you're looking at?
It's page 8, lines 20 through 22. I'll see it better if I do this. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So I was an expert witness in the Santee Cooper IRP docket. I was before the commission earlier this year. And as part of my scope of work, I conducted an independent analysis and assessment of Santee Cooper's electricity system and of alternative portfolios. So that's referring to my analysis.
Okay. And on page 10, lines 15 through 16, you talk about challenges, make it even more important for the commission to remove barriers to approval and deployment of solar in the region. What barriers are you referencing?
So, as I think I outlined some of those in the paragraph above, my understanding is that after the COVID pandemic or during the COVID pandemic, there were some significant supply chain disruptions. There was uncertainty around tariffs. There were inflationary pressures. All of those have continued to create challenges in the solar industry. And I understand that things might be finally starting to resolve a little bit, but those challenges have persisted and have made it more challenging to deploy solar than before the pandemic created those supply chain and inflationary challenges.
Okay, I read that, but the first part where it said important for the commission to remove barriers to approval, I just didn't follow that. So the things you just mentioned is what you were referencing, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, the point being that because there are all these external challenges, if the utilities are finding that it's the lowest cost to build solar, then it's in the commission's, it's the commission best interest serving the public, serving the lowest cost electricity, to see that barriers, so there can be permitting barriers, there can be interconnection barriers, there can be approval barriers, that anything the commission can do to remove barriers within its control, the commission should do, because the economics have been proven by the utilities in their resource plan.
Okay, are you saying then that an IRP is a detailed plan that can produce detailed cost estimations and estimates for generation sources? Or is it a higher level plan? What's an IRP to you?
So an IRP, it's an integrated resource plan. Obviously, there's a wide variety of IRPs across the country. I was involved in Santee Cooper's IRP proceedings, so I have some insight into the level of detail that Santee Cooper used. In the case of Santee Cooper, there's very detailed cost information on the company's current power plants, very detailed operational information, detailed information on alternatives. So the utility does technology cost assessments to understand what the alternative resource options are. So, how much does a new combined cycle plant cost to build? How much does a new combustion turbine cost to build? What solar is available? So in that way, it's a detailed study of the different generation options to produce the lowest cost plan. So I would say it is a detailed study of generation options.
Okay. And I guess that made me think about, question that Dr. Lane kind of asked, she asked. Relative to that, if you're thinking 250 megawatts of solar capital cost compared to 250 megawatt gas, that wasn't done to your knowledge, right?
Well, so not by the project developer, but the project developer isn't able to develop a gas plant, right? So they don't have cost information. If you had every solar project doing its own analysis, there'd be no consistency. What cost information would they be comparing their plant to? They could use good costs, they could use bad costs. You'd have a mishmash of just different studies, and then it would be on the commission, I guess, to evaluate the reasonableness of all the different inputs. And from my experience in the IRP, it's challenging enough with one centralized study to evaluate all the inputs, let alone a lot of different studies on lots of different projects.
I think you'd mentioned that on page 15. Matter of fact, I had that down there, lines 8 through 16. You stated Kingstree East does not have access to competitively sensitive project bid data utilized or utilities data or resource alternatives. And as I was thinking about that, could Inca or anyone for that matter just not use publicly available data like EIA and develop some, level of estimate of sources?
They could, but then I guess I would say, why would that be better? In my mind, that's not more accurate than the utility's own analysis, which is based on actual utility data. So in my mind, it wouldn't necessarily make sense to tell project developers, hey, use this public general data when you have this detailed multi-year study that the utility has done with actual like real cost data from our RFPs, from, Black and Beach, or, whatever developer could be building a gas plant. So you certainly could, but in my mind, that's not more accurate than the detailed analysis that the utility is already doing. So I'm not sure how valuable those results would be, because they don't necessarily represent the actual costs to Santee Cooper, for example, of the alternative.
If I'm understanding you correctly, though, that would be if a full-fledged RFP were done for those various and sundry things, and you received a number from some supplier. Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
Sorry, I'm not sure what are you referring
Well,
to? Which part
I
of
guess
my answer?
I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to understand what you're saying, because in the RFPs, I've heard referenced IEA many times, and more generic information, because nothing is static relative to those things or cost. So are you saying that the I guess regulated utility has more
Lost the
access
sound.
to
I'm
that?
not sure if it's on my end.
Can you hear me?
It's very quiet now. Yeah.
I'll get right up to it. How about now?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. Yes, thank you.
Probably me. So am I understanding you to say that Inga or any other solar company would not have more access or the same access that the regulated utilities would have relative to this information?
Yeah, that's absolutely what I'm saying. So a lot of that information, and I don't remember, document by document, but a lot of the cost information that Santee Cooper provided, that other utilities provide or use for IRPs, is provided under a non-disclosure agreement. So it might be provided by a Black and Beach, or another, I keep saying that name because that's the one I can think of, a company that's actually does the building of, combustion turbines or combined cycle plants. So that's competitively sensitive information from the entity that, is supplying the alternatives. So a lot of that's not public. Any of the other alternative, solar projects bidding in, that information is definitely not public. So there is a little bit of an information asymmetry that would make it, I guess, challenging and almost impossible to do an accurate study. You'd be doing, as you suggested, a study with public data. And I think as I said, my position is just that that would be an interesting study, but I don't see how that's more accurate than what the utility has done.
Okay. Now, last thought on this particular part. You mentioned Black and Beach. I know they design. I don't know if they build stuff, but they design it. So they would probably have numbers from previous designs and that kind of stuff, but that wouldn't prevent any other company from going to Black and Beach and say, hey, can you give us some estimates for X, Y, and Z sources?
I guess that's true. That I guess you could commission a study, but I'm not sure the timeline on that. At that point, when I was talking about, you were asking me about barriers to solar deployment. That's literally just adding another barrier, right? You're adding another cost that the utility has to do, another step that the utility has to go through. So, as I said, I don't know how that making a solar developer pay for the same data that the utility already has and is using in a study would really actually serve the process and serve the public interest.
Okay, but I think the utility would have to do the exact same thing to get that information, go to that consultant or engineer or whatever to get those estimated costs, would they not?
Right, so they already have it, and that's what they use for their study. So I guess what I'm saying is, I don't making the developer, do the exact same thing. In my mind, the developer's not in the business of building a gas plant. So
Okay. Final question, if you can, relative to the IRP, because I know you're familiar with Santee Cooper's IRP. Do you have an opinion on whether the cost of this project would align with the present value revenue requirements that were represented to the commission in Santee Cooper and Central's IRP? I don't remember what those numbers were off the top of my head either, but.
So I don't know the cost of this project. That was not within the scope of my work or analysis to review the specific cost and bid cost of this project.
Okay. And this is something I think I've asked before of others, and maybe relative to, the fuel cost savings. Do you have an idea of what fuel cost savings per megawatt or anything like that is or would be a range?
From this project?
Well, yes, since we're on this project, but it could be generic in general.
No, I mean, I don't know exact number, and it would change over the years as your marginal resource change. So as your coal plants retire, obviously gas is mostly on the margin now, but coal is still sometimes, and then as the coal plants retire, it would shift, and as more CTs are built, then it would shift from CC to CT. So I don't know, the number would change over the years, but it would be something to do with a gas plant, very likely most of the time.
I understand. Final question. What's the weather like in Cambridge?
So I actually live in Freeport, Maine. So I can tell you it is beautiful in fall out here. So, and quieter than Cambridge.
All righty. Thank you, Ms. Glick. No more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Casson. Any further questions? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good afternoon, Ms. Glick.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to stumble through asking this question, but as I understand it, this is the first time we have had the challenge of making this decision for a private entity. And do you have any experience from working with other providers on whether there's any bias in the project if we determine that it's appropriate for Kingstree to get this certificate prior to their participating in the conclusion of the CPRE process? Do you hear a question in there that you can help answer?
Are you asking, let me rephrase it and see if I understand. Are you asking if there's a bias that somehow they would be in a favorable position relative to other solar developers or other projects if they get this approval in advance?
Yes.
So I don't know the answer to that. I
was asking if you had any exposure, any experience in that regard with this, the order of what we're being asked to do.
No, I don't have experience and to know whether it would give them preferential. No. Okay. My assessment is that, unlike utility projects, the risk in this project is really not on the ratepayers. So in that way, I see it. It's not directly answer your question, but I see it as a benefit,
right?
Almost so you approve it, and then you have this project that, unlike with regulated projects under the utility, it's not on the ratepayers. And even if it doesn't get selected in the RFP for some reason by Santee Cooper, there's still, I would say, a lot of demand for this type of project in the region, based on what I've seen in IRPs from utilities, from other corporate buyers. So in my mind, given the amount of demand I see and the low risk for ratepayers or no risk for ratepayers, it seems like a benefit for the public here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your taking the awkward question and turning it into something reasonable.
Thank you.
Any further commissioner questions? Any redirect?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Kingstree rests.
Thank you. ORS, you have a panel. Do we have any idea the time that would be involved with that or the presentation?
I don't have a SI. It would be squarely dependent on the number of questions
I mean, it's
that parties and commissioners have for our
It's
panel.
4:30. It would be nice to finish today. Let's give it a shot and see how far we get.
Sounds good to me. ORS calls Mr. Brandon Bickley and Jeffrey Gordon to the stand.
Come forward, gentlemen.
If you would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'll start with you, Mr. Gordon. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jeffrey A. Gordon.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as a regulatory analyst in the Energy Planning and Emerging Technology Division.
Are you the same Jeffrey A. Gordon who pre-filed 6 pages of redacted and confidential direct testimony in this docket on September 5th, 2024?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I were to ask you the same questions as those posed in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, ORS asks that Mr. Gordon's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Jeffrey Gordon will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
And Mr. Gordon filed confidential version as testimony, and ORS asks that that remains of the seal.
The pre-filed confidential version of his testimony will be entered in the record as if given orally from the stand and will remain confidential as long as necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes, I did.
Could you please present that at this time?
Good afternoon, Chair Powers and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to support ORS's recommendations resulting from its examination and review of the application of Kingstree East 230 LLC for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity filed on July 5th, 2024. ORS reviewed the application, which included copies of the required statutory notifications and the direct testimonies of company witnesses, and the studies included with the application to ensure compliance with the requirements of the Siting Act. Based on the information provided by the company, ORS understands the project will serve the interests of system economy and reliability. This concludes the summary of my testimony.
Thank you. Now to you, Mr. Bickley. Would you please state your name and occupation for the record?
My name is Brandon S. Bickley. I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as a manager in the Energy Operations Division.
Are you the same Brandon S. Bickley who pre-filed 10 pages of redacted and confidential pre-filed direct testimony in this docket on September 5th, 2025?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any edits, changes, or corrections to your pre-filed testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I were to ask you the same questions as those posed in your testimony, your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Bickley be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony as well as the confidential version will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand. The confidential version shall remain confidential as long as necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Bickley, did you prepare a summary?
Yes.
Could you please present that to the Commission at this time?
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Powers and members of the Commission. My testimony provides the results of ORS's examination and review of Kingstree East 230 LLC's application for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity to construct and operate a 249 megawatt AC solar voltaic generation facility on an undeveloped site in Williamsburg County, South Carolina. My review focused specifically on the company's compliance with the Siting Act, the nature of the probable environmental impact of the project, whether the impact of the project upon the environment is justified, the reasonable assurances that the proposed project will conform to applicable state and local laws and regulations issued thereunder, and whether the public convenience and necessity requires the construction of the project. Based on the information provided by the company, ORS understands the project may result in minimal impact to the environment and, as addressed by ORS witness Gordon, may serve the interests of system economy and reliability. ORS recommends the company file updates with the Commission and ORS on the construction of the project, completion of the project, and date of commercial operation. This concludes my summary.
Thank you. Chair Powers, this panel of witnesses are available for parties, questions, and questions from the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey. We'll start with Kingstree. Any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Department of Environmental Services, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, Mr. Washington in Williamsburg County. Any questions?
No, sir, Your Honor. I don't have any questions.
Thank you very much. Cheryl O. Lane, any questions?
I do.
All right.
I just wanted to ask the question, the best management practices for the species, I think this is a part of the report, correct? DNRs?
With respect, anything involving specifics about the endangered species would have to be answered by DNR.
And they're not present?
No, ma'am. I mean, I don't think they are.
Okay. I would just like to ask a question. If either of these gentlemen are aware that Black River has just been designated as the new state park for South Carolina, and it's the most interesting state park that we have if you don't know about it, and I'm trying not to teach, but in their configuration, it will be a non-contiguous state park. So is the Office of Regulatory Staff familiar with the fact that Black River State Park is now beginning its movement to become, it has been declared a scenic river, but is the Office of Regulatory Staff familiar with the huge booklet that has been produced on Black River as a new state park?
So individually, I'm not aware of that, but again, I would have to point to anything involving parks, recreation would have to be answered specifically by PRT. ORS, in manner of good faith with the statute, we attempt to communicate with all the other state agencies just so we're aware of what any concerns that they have, something of that nature. But something specific to that effect would have to be directed at another state agency.
Thank you.
Is that all, Ms. Lane?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner questions?
Quickly.
Commissioner Caston?
Quickly. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Does ORS have any concerns with increased solar penetration?
Can you be more specific? I'm not really sure what specifically you're referring to or
well,
referencing.
let me back up, and then we'll circle around to that. Are there any concerns relative to risk reliability, including but not limited to the inverter issues or any concerns ORS has?
There are always concerns specifically with inverters. You know, they can fail, but as you get a more diverse mix of generation sources, traditionally speaking, your risks from reliability perspective go down. So if you have solar not generating, you've got coal or natural gas that is generating, and if coal or natural gas isn't generating, then solar would hopefully be able to take up that slack.
Okay.
Commissioner, if I might add as well, going into design-specific information does go a little outside of the scope of our review in this matter. We are looking for compliance of the statute, and then we do look at some of the design documentation. But again, it's not necessarily for specificities on engineering design or analysis, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I appreciate that. That clears it up totally. Relative to integration of solar and such, is ORS, if this is beyond the scope, let me know. So ORS aware of or study or look into any best practices? Do you stay on top of that kind of stuff relative to integration of solar?
So ORS continues to review all generation sources. Witness Gordon can speak more when it comes to need, necessity, and things in the realm of the IRP. But in general, ORS does review and evaluate generation mixes, as we do for every docket and every matter that comes before us.
And circling back to that first thing, what I was really trying to, and I did a poor job, is there some magic break point as to where, you know, you don't want 80% gas, we don't want 80% this? Does ORS evaluate that or have a understanding of that type thing?
So in terms of a magic break point, that would exceed our boundaries because ORS is very careful. We do not dictate how the utilities specifically operate.
Understand.
Similar in this regard, this is a private entity, so we would not dictate to the private entity how they should build or what they should build or why. We do evaluate for the statute, and we do use our experience, our backgrounds, the various resources we have at our disposal for our reviews. But we do make sure that we don't cross that boundary of dictating how you should do something, if that makes sense, Commissioner.
Absolutely does. I expect that's appreciated. Finally, and I want to make sure, I think this was in your testimony, Mr. Bickley, on page 3. You know, you talk about part of the purpose of your testimony was to, to address whether the impact of the project on the environment is justified. And you did go and kind of talk about it, but based on your review, can you clearly state that the impact of the project on the environment is justified?
Yes, Commissioner, based on the review of all available factual information during our review provided by the company and discovery, it is, as I stated at the end of my testimony, we believe that this may result in minimal impact.
All right, and finally, as you stated, and I asked it earlier with someone else, I don't remember who, this is a private entity that's developing this. There's no risk or jeopardy for a utility customer one way or the other, whether this project is successful or unsuccessful. Is that a fair statement?
I think I would qualify that statement by saying that, as the company has stated here previously with some of its witnesses, as well as in discovery to ORS, the company will incur the costs, right? So this is not like a Duke or a Dominion or someone who is going for cost recovery, which this is also a request for certificate, which cost recovery is not a part of this docket. So in that regard, I would agree that risk is not set on utility ratepayers.
Thank you. No more questions, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Casson. Any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good afternoon, gentlemen. As I listened and as I read, I think I see a little bit of difference between what each of you are saying, and I think it has to do with the word may. And I heard may serve system economy and reliability today, but that's very different than a determination that it shall, it will, not shall, but that it will. Witness Bickley, I think you state, let's see. I have too many notes. And maybe I guess I've heard may several times today. Would you describe again what ORS's position is about the Kingstree application?
Sure, Commissioner. I think you're referring to page 10 of my testimony.
Thank you for the help.
And I believe you're looking at starting at line 9 with the question, will the public convenience and necessity be served? I will point to my testimony and say that based on the information provided by the company, it's our understanding that the project may result in minimal impact to the environment, and then Witness Gordon addresses the system economy and reliability piece.
And so, Witness Gordon, is may good enough?
Well, with respect, I think may is what we have right now. And to say it will would be speculative, seeing as how Santee Cooper hasn't yet made a determination in its RFP. So what we can say is that if everything goes 100% according to plan, then everything went 100% according to plan. So that's why we use the word may.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, that the may is conditioned on the CPRE process.
It's based on the best available information that we have at this current point in time.
Right. Right.
And I will point out, and this information was confidential, so I won't specifically detail it, but ORS asked if the project were to not go through, what would happen. And the response was confidential, but the company did respond to ORS's request, and it did not give us concern.
And I addressed that in my testimony.
Yes, it's confidentially marked in Witness Gordon's testimony.
Okay. And this, switching gears, this last question is one in your roles you may be able to answer, but are you aware of South Carolinians that express concern about this project to your office?
Commissioner, I actually checked the public notice this morning on the docket itself. I didn't see any objections filed there. I am aware of Dr. Lane having a phone conversation with our consumer services group, and then I'm also aware of her filing.
Right.
That's the only concern that I'm aware of. And through the discovery process, ORS continually asked the company, are there concerns, are there objections? Same way that we ask, does DNR, DHEC, or PRT, or excuse me, DES, not DHEC, have
That's
concerns?
okay, I didn't even
know, I'm still getting used to it, I really am. But we followed up on all of those leads multiple times, and we're not aware, apart from what has already been expressed. So there are no other concerns we're aware of.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you. Any further commissioner questions? Any redirect?
No to redirect.
Thank you, ma'am.
ORS rests its case.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you are excused. Is there anything further from from the company?
Not in the way of evidence, Mr. Chairman. If the commission wanted to discuss proposed orders,
All right, I'll let you do that with counsel.
Okay.
Ms. Lane?
This is gonna be short, I promise. I would be remiss if I did not, say something about no one, protesting. On December the 19th, I presented a request for a moratorium to our county council. I know could this be
Ms.
my?
Lane, Ms. Lane, I'm gonna have to cut you off. That's not in the record of this case and
Could-
will not be considered by the commission in this case.
Could I do closing?
The only thing is the testimony you've heard, you do not have any witnesses to present. You did not file any testimony.
Can I not do a closing
There's
statement?
there's nothing that we can go into as far as any of that, and it does not belong in our record.
So I can't
I'm
do a
sorry.
closing statement?
I mean, what happened with your county council has nothing to do with this case. We are not allowed to consider that. It's not in this record.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you all for your time and your patience in this matter. Our council will get with you now about proposed orders. This matter is completed. Thank you very much.